Chapter 287. Lone Moon glanced at Chef and sighed. Don't worry, Godfiend, that little bastard, I'll go back and deal with him one day. As long as Master is here. I Ching had no intention of taking revenge. Anywhere is fine. Hey, can't you have some principles? He smelled something sour again. Xin Ying's sister should be able to send us back soon. Lone Moon could only look at Xin Ying. Right? Ha. That might not be the case. What ha? Lone Moon rolled his eyes at her. Don't you want to go back and teach that Godfiend a lesson? So troublesome, my ass, can you not be lazy at this time? The injured one is your disciple. Also, what the hell are you doing? You spent half a day combing your hair and you tied 2 ponytails for a big man like Chef, is that appropriate? It's quite good. Good my ass. It hurts my eyes, okay? I think it's quite good too. You're bragging, shut up. Lone Moon felt that I Ching had really become an immortal chef, no, a cooking god. Although they had only been back for slightly more than a month, after 3,000 years, his skills had not deteriorated at all. Even the kitchen utensils that had accumulated a layer of dust in Xin Ying's house, he only had to briefly explain them once and he could use them smoothly. He was much faster than learning about swordsmanship. The few of them ate for a full 2 hours before they finished all the dishes on the table. Lone Moon was just about to introduce the basic situation of this world to Chef when suddenly there was a familiar beep from inside the house. It was Xin Jing's message. It's my sister Hyde. Xin Ying threw her chopsticks and turned her head. What? Lone Moon faltered, not understanding why she said that. Stop talking nonsense, hurry. With that said, she stuffed the 2 of them under the table out of habit. Lone Moon, wait, why did he have to lie down too? Little Ying. Xin Jing's voice sounded in the house. Sister. Xin Ying immediately stood up straight. I've already checked on the problem with your body, I haven't found the answer, but it shouldn't have any negative effects. Yes. But I've contacted the plane that you went to, a similar plane manager. I want her to help you take a look at the situation, Xin Jing said in a low voice. When I'm done with the things on hand, I'll bring you over. All right, big sister. Xin Ying nodded. Get ready. Don't run around. No problem, sis. Yes. Just as Xin Jing was about to cut off the communication, she suddenly seemed to have thought of something. Oh yes, I sense that you directly activated the space transmission just now. The distance is very close and it's even to your home. What's so urgent? She stiffened. It's nothing. I just got lost and wanted to go home. Really? Xin Jing's eyes narrowed. Why didn't you teleport back when you were lost a few galaxies away? I'm hungry now. She immediately changed the topic to her mutated body. Oh. Xin Jing nodded. Then can you explain to me who the man lying on the left under your table is? He could even see that. She had clearly blocked other perspectives. Unexpectedly, Xin Jing was not as angry as she was the last time. She only raised her eyebrows and said, I haven't seen you bring a man home for so many years. You brought 2 back from this area. This is considered eating from the bowl and looking at the pot? Lone Moon in the bowl, I Ching in the pot. Xin Ying frowned. Sis, he's not my boyfriend. Father Nyo wasn't either. Xin Jing's eyes darkened as if she had seen through everything. Since he's not, then why did you use the space transmission? Xin Ying lowered her head at once. She had no choice but to confess. He came from the previous plane. Xin Jing's expression darkened instantly. She glanced at Chef who had crawled out from under the table. Her eyes were as cold as ice. That means, he's an intruder. Sis, listen to me, shut up. Xin Jing's voice became even colder. The way she looked at Xin Ying was like a knife that was about to poke out of the screen. Even Lone Moon trembled subconsciously. Did you go out to train your guts? Stay here obediently. I'll be right back. With that said, the screen dimmed before anyone could react. Lone Moon felt nervous for no reason. Xin Jing's expression was completely different from when she first discovered him. It was as if she was really angry. Xin Ying, what does your sister mean? He couldn't help but ask. Xin Ying's expression darkened. All those who invade the plane without permission are unstable factors that need to be eliminated. Eliminated? She wouldn't really kill Chef, would she? Lone Moon's heart tightened. For some reason, he just felt that if Xin Jing wanted to make a move, Xin Ying wouldn't be able to stop her. Then what should we do? Master. I Ching's expression also darkened. I came here voluntarily. If there's any punishment, I'm willing to accept it. I won't resist. You're crazy. Lone Moon exclaimed. Xin Jing is the plane manager. I'm afraid you can't bear it at all. Forget it. Shining seemed to think of something. Her expression darkened. She gritted her teeth and said, if my sister really wants to make a move, I have another way. Maybe it can stop her. After all, he was her chef, her disciple. She had to try. If he died, so be it. Really? She should have said so earlier if she had a trump card. But looking at her cowardly face in front of Xinjing, why was she so untrustworthy? After all, she had lived under her sister's tyranny for so many years. Lone Moon didn't have time to ask in detail. In the next moment, the space in front of him twisted. Xinjing's figure instantly appeared in the layer. So, he's the disciple you took in the other world? Xinjing sat on the sofa alone. She glanced at the three people standing neatly in front of her. Yes. Xinjing nodded. Sister Xinjing, chef chased after us because of us. And he didn't know that he needed your permission to travel through planes. Lone Moon also explained immediately. As the saying goes, the ignorant are not guilty. Why don't you forget it? Forget it? Xinjing laughed coldly. The cold air on her body swept over. Do you think plane invasion is such a simple thing? Do you know how much this will affect the plane? How much mess do I have to clean up? But he didn't do it on purpose? Just say that he didn't do it on purpose. Xinjing stood up directly. Her gaze was even colder. She stabbed the three of them like a knife. This precedent cannot be set. If anyone can burrow into my plane, then this world is finished. Littling, they don't understand. Don't tell me you don't understand this logic? I understand. And this one too. Xinjing suddenly turned to look at Lone Moon. Meh. Lone Moon's heart jumped. His back broke out in a cold sweat for no reason. Chapter 288. Do you think I don't know about the messed up data you brought back from the alternate plane? Lone Moon was shocked. Data? His cultivation level. Although your transmigration was not of your own accord, if you continue like this, it will still have unpredictable effects on this world. Xinjing glanced at him. I just don't have time to deal with you for now. Don't forget, apart from being Xinying's older sister, I'm also the manager of this plane. She took a few steps forward, each step seemed to be stepping on their hearts, bringing with it a bone-chilling coldness, causing them to lower their heads subconsciously, as if facing the highest existence of this world that they could not resist. Whether it's an invader or messed up data, I will not allow it to exist. Anything that affects the stability of the plane, I will absolutely not allow it to exist. The moment she said that, Lone Moon felt something pressing down on him, and subconsciously took a step back. If not for Xining holding him, Lone Moon would have knelt down directly. At this moment he really realized what a manager was. She clearly did nothing, but he felt a special pressure coming from his divine perception, and even his cultivation was about to dissipate uncontrollably. Older sister. Xining suddenly spoke and Lone Moon's whole body relaxed, breaking free from that invisible pressure. He turned to look at Chef beside him, and found that he was in the same situation as him. Don't call me. Xinjing turned back and glared at him. What have I taught you since young? Have you forgotten all about it? I haven't forgotten. Xining lowered her head even more. Haven't forgotten? Look at what you've done. I asked you to help me manage the plane and this is how you help? Xinjing became even more furious, cold air coming out of her whole body. I thought that after a few days out, you would know to restore this person's data, and you even brought an invader back. The more she spoke, the colder her tone became, and her expression was one of exasperation. You've been out for a few days, you've become careless. You don't even listen to me anymore, do you? No. No. She laughed coldly and directly brought up a light screen. All right then. This matter can't be delayed any longer. Whether you want to eliminate or expel the invader, deal with it for me now. Also, erase this person's data immediately. Erase their memories while you're at it. Xinjing was serious. Lone Moon's heart tightened. He tugged at the corner of Xinying's clothes. What happened to the killer move? If not now, then when? The corner of Xinying's mouth twitched and she gave him a meaningful look. After a while, he looked up and asked, Sis, do we really have to do this? What? Do you want me to do it myself? Xinjing's expression turned even colder. All right. Xining suddenly sucked in a deep breath, as if she had made up her mind about something. Gritting her teeth, she turned back to give Lone Moon and I Ching a warning look. Emphasizing every word, she said, Don't laugh. Lone Moon did not understand what she meant. She took a step forward and the expression on her face instantly changed. She blinked her eyes twice and a layer of mist instantly appeared on them. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly, and she crossed her arms in front of her chest, making a pitiful expression. In a second she had transformed from a lazy otaku into a soft and cute girl. Even her voice rose by a few octaves, with a hint of coquettish tone. "Sis, don't be so fierce, just listen to me this time, promise littling to let them go, okay?" She puffed up her pink little face and blinked her eyes hard as if there were thousands of stars in them. "I will definitely listen to sis in the future, be good." For a moment, it was as if something was shooting out of her body. So very very cute. Especially cute. Fatally cute. Oh asterisk. Q. With a thud, something hit her chest. Her heart beat like a drum and her breathing quickened. In an instant she was hit by the fatal aura called cute. In the next second, "I promise you." Xinjing's cold expression was like a flood that broke the dam. She hugged the person in front of her, pressed her into her arms and rubbed her face crazily. I promise you, sis will promise you anything." "Who asked my littling to be so cute?" Then the two of them, "Anything?" "Anything is fine, little Ying's happiness is the most important." "Thank you sis, you're the best to littling." You're so cute, anything you say is right." Littling likes sis the most." "Me too. You stopped acting like a spoiled child to me since we were 3 years old. Sis is so touched, my cute littling is finally back." What the hell?" Lone Moon took a deep breath and pressed down on his pounding heart. Only then did he come back to his senses. As expected of a killer move, acting cute was too scary. Xin Ying's back was clearly facing them, but at that moment he felt like he was about to lose his life. He faintly heard a special notification sound beside his ear. Ding. Xin Ying activated her killer move, acting cute. Ding. Xin Jing received a critical hit. Fortunately he reacted quickly enough to not be implicated. This move was too much of a cheat, it was a shameless indiscriminate attack. Wait chef, what's wrong? Wake up. Why is your face so red? Is your injury not healed yet? Holy shit. Why is your nose bleeding? An hour later. Cough, since little Ying is pleading on your behalf, I won't pursue the matter between the two of you for now. Xin Jing, who had finally returned to normal, coughed and returned to her noble and cool self. But even if I don't do anything, the two of you will still be rejected by this plane. The manager of your world did not respond, so I can't send you back directly. I can't be sure what will happen if you stay here. Can't you do what Kai Tian did and give us a permit first? Xining asked. Do you think permits are cabbages that you can grow as many as you want? Xin Jing rolled her eyes. Xining pouted. Older sister, Xin Jing stiffened, then her heart softened. Cough. It's not that we can't give them permits. But you have to have the ability to pass the test. Test? Lone Moon was stunned. Nowadays, even learning a foreign language requires a permit. Of course we have to take a permit too. Xin Jing glanced at the two of them. Both of your data are indeed very high, but it's not certain whether you can pass the test. So, did it mean that they needed to take a temporary residence permit? What kind of test? Let's take the job that we originally planned to give to little Ying. She pulled up a screen. Instantly, 2 black and red planets appeared in front of the two of them. These 2 dead planets were infected by the alternate world during the space storm last time. Although there is no civilization on them, many animals and plants were affected. Choose a planet and use whatever method you use to get rid of the effects within a day. Then I'll give you the right to enter the plane. Chapter 289. All right. I Ching nodded and stood up. As long as he did not leave Master, anything was fine. Lone Moon and Xin Ying exchanged a look and stood up as well. All right. Xin Jing suddenly added, Little Ying, you can't go. What? You're in a special situation now. If you do it, there's no need for the test. Xin Ying frowned and her voice softened. Sister, Xin Jing's mouth twitched and her attitude changed instantly. All right, you can go, but you can't do it yourself, understand? All right, sister. No problem, sister. Lone Moon, I Ching. He felt that Xin Jing's cuteness buff had not worn off. This was a barren wasteland. The ground was scorched and all the living things seemed to be left with only the instinct to devour. They bit and gnawed at each other as if they would never stop. There were pieces of fresh or rotten meat all over the ground. The air was filled with an unpleasant stench. Lone Moon instantly understood why this was a dead planet. Apart from the fact that there was no one here, this was like the scene of a zombie movie. There was no sign of life at all. The moment he and Chef landed on the ground, they began to clean up the wild animals and plants around them. With their cultivation, it was not difficult to deal with these mindless monsters, but there were too many of them. Every time they killed one, another would pounce on them endlessly. Shining, how big is this planet? Lone Moon looked at the monsters gathering again and could not help but ask. Shining kicked the stone under her feet. Something flashed in her eyes before she answered, the size of more than 100 Earths. What? Lone Moon's eyes widened. How long were they going to take to clear this? Xinjing was tricking them. It was definitely true. If these animals and plants are all infected, we can't clean them all up in a day no matter what. More and more monsters gathered around them and they seemed to be getting stronger. At first they could barely find a place to land. Gradually they could only fly into the air to rest temporarily. But even so, there were many monsters that could fly. What should we do? Fly that way. Shining suddenly pointed to the right. There should be clues we need there. Lone Moon was stunned. He slashed at the giant bird beside him and sped up without hesitation. After flying for more than an hour, there was already a huge flock of birds behind him. They did not seem to have any intention of giving up. What exactly are we looking for? Lone Moon could not help but ask. I'm looking for some information, Shining answered. Suddenly, she raised her hand and pointed in front of her. There. Lone Moon looked up and realized that there was a triangular building floating in the air in front of him. It looked like it was only a few square meters. It was silvery white on the outside, reflecting the sunlight. If one did not look closely, one would not notice it. What is this? An abandoned detection station, Shining replied, then directed Chef to fly over. No one knew how she did it, but a door instantly opened on the triangular building. Inside was a small space that could only fit 3 people. What are we doing here? Lone Moon looked confused. Looking for information about this planet. As he spoke, he suddenly tapped on the right corner of the wall. Instantly, a virtual image of the planet popped up. There were all sorts of data beside it that they could not understand. How did you know that there was information here? Lone Moon and I Ching were both shocked. The Star Alliance has a detection station on every planet in Area T. Shining answered casually. There's one on Earth too, but it's been blocked. This was also why she could connect to the star web. Although they did not understand, they felt that it was very impressive. Shining looked at the map and then at the data beside it. Then she said, this is indeed an Or planet. What Or planet? More than 80% of this planet is made up of Or like W9851, Shining explained. This kind of ore is very common in the galaxy. There are many of them on other planets too. That's why this detection station was abandoned. But W9851 ore is highly explosive. When it explodes, it will be very powerful and spread. You mean to say? Lone Moon's eyes lit up. He immediately understood what she meant. If we directly explode these ores, we can blow up this planet? Yes. Shining nodded. But there's a problem. What problem? The surface of this planet has already been infected by those animals and plants. The ores inside are buried very deep. My sister won't let me do it. Unless you directly cut open the surface and use a special bomb to detonate it, you won't be able to spread it to the entire planet. Then how thick is this surface? A few thousand meters. That thick. That was too scary. I'll go. I Ching suddenly spoke. You can't cut it open either. Before Lone Moon could finish, Chef had already turned and walked out. Wait, there's still? Before he could finish, I Ching's body suddenly exploded with unprecedentedly huge sword chi. He slashed his sword towards the flock of birds that had already caught up to them. In an instant there was only a huge flash of fire. The huge birds that originally filled the sky were directly swallowed up by the fire. The sky seemed to be burning. Everywhere was filled with suffocating sword chi. Even the entire detection station was shaking. Lone Moon was shocked. Although he knew that Chef's cultivation was different from before, this was too frightening. And this fire, true phoenix fire. Wasn't he a dragon? Before he could think clearly, Chef directly flew down to the ground after dealing with the chasing flock of birds. In an instant, the sky full of sword chi rushed down. Suddenly there was a golden light all around. That golden light slowly gathered and finally formed a huge sword, directly slashing towards the ground. There was a loud bang. It was obvious that the entire planet was shaking. Suddenly, a huge crack appeared on the ground. It expanded infinitely to both sides and became wider and wider. The bottom was like an abyss, one could not see the bottom. Split open. Lone Moon's eyes widened. Indeed, he was a little cheat. He hurriedly turned to look at the light screen beside Shining. He saw that it showed the words more than 2,000 meters. Still not enough. Just a little bit more. Chef. He was just about to call him back. Suddenly the cry of a phoenix rang out. I Ching, who was still holding his sword, suddenly transformed into a huge fire phoenix. He charged straight into the cracked abyss. The originally pitch-black abyss was instantly illuminated, and fiery flames extended all the way to the bottom. The surrounding shaking became even more intense. The number on the light screen in front of Shining that had just stopped jumped again. 2,700. 2,800. 2,900. 3,000. It's done. Lone Moon's heart leaped. He immediately conjured a seal and sent a voice transmission. It's done, chef. The number on the screen stopped. After a while, the light that had sunk into the abyss flew out and returned to the detection station. Chef, who had already changed back into his original form, walked out of the fire. Chapter 290. I haven't seen you for so long, you can even transform into a phoenix. He was indeed a mixed blood dragon and phoenix, able to change between three forms at will. Lone Moon casually patted I Ching's shoulder. Chef's body swayed and he looked like he was about to fall. Shining, who was at the side, reached out to support him. Chef. Lone Moon was shocked too, only then did he realize that I Ching's face was pale, and there were fine beads of sweat on his forehead. Holy shit, are you alright? He hurriedly felt his pulse. I'm fine. I Ching shook his head, the corners of his mouth twitching, as if trying hard to give Shining a smile. Master, don't worry, I'm just tired from using up all my god power. Shining frowned. Are you really alright? He nodded hard. Shining looked towards Father Nyo. Lone Moon nodded and sighed in relief. There's nothing wrong with his pulse. It was indeed just that his god power was used up. Let's get rid of this planet quickly. What do we do next? Just buy a detonator and throw it down. Shining then turned back to the light screen and clicked on it. In an instant, all sorts of detonator devices popped up all around. There are quite a few on the Star Web black market. She glanced around and then directly clicked on the cheapest one. In the next instant, a notification sounded in the house. Beep. Your balance is insufficient, unable to purchase. Lone Moon, I Ching, Air? Shining stiffened. I forgot to recharge my game tokens. Recharge your game tokens? Don't you freaking use black when you go online? How do I switch accounts? The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched as he took a deep breath. Shining faltered. But Lone Moon directly went forward and clicked on the wristband that he had not had time to take off. In the next instant there was a ding sound, and the screen immediately cut in front of him. The user directly switched the two words Shining to Father Nyo. He raised his hand and clicked on the most expensive picture at the top. Two beeps were heard and a familiar notification sounded. Ding, purchase successful. We look forward to your next visit. In an instant, a luxurious version of the detonator glowing with blue light appeared in front of them. Shining, I Ching. Shining looked up and was almost blinded by the huge string of zeros on Father Nyo's Star Web account balance. Father Nyo, did you hack the Interstellar Bank? What black bank? Lone Moon rolled his eyes at her like a seal. Is this the money you earned in that online game with you last time? And didn't it reset to 0? My points have been cleared to 0. But the corpses of the monsters that we cleared are still under our names, so I've been dealing with them in the past few days. And then, you sold the minions? Wasn't that trash? So valuable? I also checked the industry chain of the game planet. I contracted the corpses to a recycling company and sold their parts in batches to earn some profit. There's still half of the star coins that haven't been transferred to my account. As he spoke, he glanced at the numbers on the screen. Sure enough, the eye-piercing number was still jumping up, and he could hear the beeping sound of the bill arriving. Shining, I Ching, why are you looking at me like that? Nothing, I just suddenly really want to call you Daddy. Get lost. With Father Nyo's strong financial support, the three of them finally completed the task in one day. Xinjing kept her word. She directly took out 2 pieces of paper and wrote the words "Plain Pass" on it and handed it to them. Lone Moon looked at the A4 paper in front of him and could not react for a long time. Wasn't this 2F** King casual? Didn't they say that the pass could not be given out casually? In the end, it was just a piece of broken paper. Lone Moon glanced at Shining beside him and held back the ridicule in his heart. Instead, I Ching beside him was shocked. He did not know if it was an illusion, but ever since he came to this master's world, the feeling of being pulled by someone had suddenly disappeared. Oh yes, you said Xinying's body problem before. How is it? Lone Moon asked. Little Ing. Xinjing turned to look at the person beside her. Her gaze instantly softened, the love in her eyes almost overflowed. She rubbed her face wildly. When I think of my so cute littling being dragged to a foreign plane and suffering so much, big sister's heart aches so much. Don't worry now, I will definitely help you find that bastard. Shining. Loveless in life. JPG Ching. Did Master's older sister activate some special attribute? Lone Moon. This fellow must be a siscon definitely. Also, this Shining was using cheats the whole time. She did not suffer at all, okay? I can't detect the condition of her body, but I have already found a plane similar to the one you were talking about. Jing thought of something and directly opened a light screen. She began to operate. I have already contacted the manager there. She will send the pass over in a while. Let's go there directly and let her help you take a look. What exactly is wrong with your body? Similar plane. Lone Moon was stunned. Are there other immortal cultivation planes? Yes. Jing nodded. The number of planes cannot be estimated. Apart from our world, which is completely different from the one you went to, there are also parallel planes that are very similar. Then can they really see the problem with Shining? That's not certain. Jing sighed and frowned. But we have to try. After a while, a notification sound suddenly rang out in the room. The pass has been sent over. Jing stood up. A light screen immediately popped up in front of her. On it, the word pass was written simply and crudely in red. Jing only raised her hand. Instantly there was a flash of light. The word split into two like a door opening. In a moment, a white passageway appeared in front of them. Let's go. Jing nodded at the few of them and walked in first. In a moment her figure disappeared. The few of them exchanged a look. Apart from Jing, this was the first time they had seen another manager. They could not help but feel nervous. They wondered what the managers of other planes were like. Lone Moon heaved a sigh of relief and followed. All he saw was a flash of white light in front of him. In the next moment they were in another world. He faintly heard the familiar sound of cooking. A young woman's voice could be heard. You're here? Wait for me. I'll be done immediately after I finish this round. Shining, Lone Moon, I Ching. What the hell? Chapter 291. Lone Moon looked at the manager of another plane in front of him, a little confused. Dressed in home clothes and a pair of slippers, he held a phone in his hand. One hand moved quickly and at the same time he gritted his teeth and cursed. The one in the middle lane is coming, what are you spacing out for? Stop him. Why are you still fighting in the wilderness? Hurry up and gather. The dragon is out, let's go steal it now. Fatty, what are you doing? Go big, go big. Holy shit, why are you pulling me back? Do you know how to play? The few of them sat on the sofa for a whole half an hour, the other side did not stop, and the more they played, the more excited they became, as if they had completely forgotten that there were 4 people sitting opposite them. What happened to the immortal cultivation world that was similar? Wasn't the place where this manager lived a little too down to earth? It was obviously more similar to the modern world, even the mobile games were the same. Lone Moon was about to ask Jing if she opened the wrong portal, when a man suddenly walked out of the kitchen. He was clearly wearing warm home clothes, but his whole body was emitting a cold aura, as if one would get frostbite if they looked at him for too long. He glanced at the few people sitting here awkwardly, put down the dishes in his hands and walked over. Yeah. He called the girl who was addicted to the game, his voice as cold as his person, but the way he looked at the girl, it was like ice had just melted, and he reached out to take her phone. The girl instinctively reached out to grab it. Master, I'm about to win. You Yao. The man frowned, glancing at the person on the sofa opposite him. The girl was stunned for a moment, then turned her head, the corner of her mouth twitching. Sorry, I forgot that you guys are still here. She directly stood up, coughed. Little Jing, long time no see. She smiled at Jing, her gaze fixed on Shining and her eyes brightened. This is your littling, right? So cute, so cute. Right? Jing also smiled into a line and pulled the girl to start talking. You don't know, she was even cuter when she was young. I still have her picture with me. Really? Let me see. The two immediately huddled together. Look, this is when she was 1, this is when she was 2. Wow, it's true. Look at her pink cheeks. How did you raise her? What milk powder? That's a lot to learn. Milk powder can't be fed casually, Wang Yao said. Since you have experience, why don't you introduce it to me? It just so happens that my kid can use it. Okay. Let me tell you. Shining, Lone Moon, I Ching, seeing the two of them start to share their parenting tips, The trio on the sofa were speechless. The corner of Xinying's mouth twitched. She could not help but tug at the person beside her. Big sister. Do you still remember why you're here? Xinjing was stunned. Only then did she put away her phone reluctantly. Yao Yao, I've already told you the general situation last time. This time, I'm here because I want you to take a look at Little Ling. Your plane is about the same as hers. I think you might be able to find out what happened to her. Don't worry. The other party patted her flat chest angrily. Your problem is my problem. Leave it to me, there's no problem. With that said, she finally turned to look at them. She turned to smile at Xining and reached out a hand. Hello, Little Ling. I'm your sister's friend. My name is Zhu Yao. Xining. She directly reached out and shook her hand. Zhu Yao turned back to look at Xinjing. Oh yes, you didn't make it clear in your message. What's wrong with her body? Her data cannot be detected. It even exceeds the limit. Xinjing said in a low voice. And this situation only happened after she was pulled to another plane. Zhu Yao nodded and gestured for Xining to stand up. She walked one round around Xining and after a while she frowned and said, Strange, I don't see anything wrong with you. Forget about divine qi, there wasn't even the slightest bit of spiritual energy. This was not very possible for someone who had been to an immortal cultivation plane. You can't see it either? Xinjing's expression darkened. Zhu Yao thought for a moment. Suddenly she seemed to have thought of something. She turned to look at the cold-faced man behind her. Master, can you help Little Ling take a look too? She then explained, My master knows more about the immortal cultivation world than I do. The man frowned and looked at the two people on the sofa beside him. Their cultivation levels are not lower than mine. If they can't see it, it's the same for me. Then I can only open the system's heavenly eye. She suddenly thought of something and summoned a light screen in her hand. Realm Spirit gave me a detection system before he left. It was originally used to predict and warn me of bugs in my plane. Through the system, I can see the cause and effect of all unreasonable objects. She turned to look at Xining and explained while operating. If Little Ying's data really overflows, then the system will definitely judge her as a bug and label her with the letters BUG. This way, as long as we check the cause, then we can know why she became like this. Xinjing was delighted. Yes. Zhu Yao nodded. But this word can only be seen by the manager. With a beep, a ray of light swept towards Xining. Indeed, through the light screen, Xinying's appearance began to blur in Zhu Yao and Xinjing's eyes. Faintly, words appeared on her face. And they became bigger and clearer. In a short while they could clearly see the words on her face. Boss. Zhu Yao, Xinjing, what the hell? Why is it a boss? What happened to the promised bug? And why is it golden? Wasn't it always black before? Yao Yao, didn't you say there were only 3 letters? Why did 4 appear? I don't know either. Never had such a situation happen before? To the system, bugs had to be fixed. Then could it be that the boss had to be pushed down? Can we still find out the cause like this? Let me try. Zhu Yao paused and immediately reacted. She pressed the button on the light screen. With a beep, a line of red words instantly popped out. Wrong target, unable to obtain. Looks like it won't work. Zhu Yao frowned and said apologetically, I'm sorry, Little Jing. I can't help you. It's fine. I just wanted to give it a try. What's more, I won't be able to find out anything. You haven't been a manager for long either. It's normal that you can't find out anything. Yes, I'm still a newbie. She paused halfway through her sentence. She suddenly thought of something and widened her eyes. Why don't I introduce someone to you? You must know. Who? The manager of my original world. Zhu Yao hurriedly tapped on the light screen in front of her and opened a communication channel. She dialed 3 times but the call did not go through. It was not that she did not pick up, but the other party immediately hung up. Yet she seemed to be long used to it. She continued dialing for the 4th time. In the next moment, a man's figure appeared on the light screen. His eyes were so fierce that he looked like he wanted to eat someone. He opened his mouth and said, Do you want to die? Chapter 292. Ha ha ha. Zhu Yao laughed. Boss, is Guogua there? Nope. Scram. The man's expression darkened. Just as he was about to hang up, a gentle voice sounded. Yao Yao, it's you. A girl suddenly appeared on the screen and pulled the man away. I haven't seen you for a few days. Where did you go? I went back to the immortal cultivation world for a business trip, Zhu Yao replied. Then, with a serious expression, she said, Guogua, can you ask your man to do me a favor? I have a friend. She told him about Xining. Just as she finished speaking, the man snorted. What does the other planes have to do with me? Is it Yao Yao's best friend? The girl suddenly interrupted. Of course. Zhu Yao nodded. The man's expression darkened. We're not free. Help? All right. In the next moment, the space in the room twisted and a spatial tunnel appeared in front of everyone. Xinjing, Zhu Yao, Yu Yan, the three people who were watching the whole time. According to Zhu Yao, her best friend's partner was an experienced manager. The plane she was originally in was the one he managed. That was a plane that was infinitely close to Xinjing's. He was already a manager when that world was born. If there was anyone else who could find out about Xin Ying's situation, it would be him. And after checking Xin Ying's data, his face, which had been filled with disdain and wanted to chase everyone away, finally revealed a different expression. The screen in his hand was still lit up with a bunch of messy data, but the entire screen was red. How is it? Yi Qing asked anxiously. May I ask what happened to my master? The man's expression became even weirder. He scanned Xining from head to toe, then sat down at the side and said, Nothing. Everyone was stunned. What did he mean? If I'm not wrong, her situation is better than everyone else's. He glanced at Xinjing and Zhu Yao, then added, including us. What do you mean? Lone Moon was stunned. Although I can't be sure, I'm not far from it. He gave Xining a meaningful look and said with certainty, Can you feel the limits of your power? Xining paused. Bottom line? Was there. That should be it. He didn't seem to need her to answer. He walked over and sat down beside Guogua. Turning to look at Xinjing, he said, You are also a manager. You should know why we exist, right? An existence higher than this plane, Xinjing replied directly. Yes. The man continued, We are existences that are higher than our own plane, or were born at the same time as the plane like me. Or they can be directly acknowledged by the plane like you. Or the will of the world itself, for example, that one who often scrounges for food. He pointed at Zhu Yao. Zhu Yao, in short, we are the plane itself, he continued. That's why we can manage the entire plane. As long as it is born in the plane, everything is within the scope of management, nothing can escape our eyes. Unless the other party has left the plane and is given control by the world's consciousness like a freeloader. Zhu Yao. Enough, stop calling me a freeloader. I know this, Xinjing said in a low voice. Xinjing said in a low voice. But little Ing belongs to my plane. I can sense her connection, but I can't find out her situation. That's because she willingly allowed you to sense her. If she didn't want to, you wouldn't even be able to sense her existence. Xinjing faltered. At once, everyone in the room turned to look at Xining. Xining froze. She silently put down the apple she had just picked up. What's wrong, can't I eat it? Yi Qing, who was beside her, habitually handed over an immortal fruit. How can this be? Xinjing was still a little confused. Little Ing is my biological sister. Of course she belongs to my plane. Wasn't I a gift from you when you topped up your phone? Xining suddenly interrupted. Nonsense. Xinjing glared at her. I obviously picked you up from the rubbish bin back then. Xining, Yi Qing, Lone Moon, was there a difference? She was raised by me since she was young. She has the same blood as me. Xinjing continued. Compared to other people, her connection to the plane is deeper. It's impossible for her to escape my senses. If you don't believe me, try using your plane authority. The man pointed at Xining. Xinjing faltered. She turned to look at Xining, her eyes narrowed. At once, there seemed to be a huge aura emanating from her body. It went straight toward the opposite side. In just a moment, the entire room was filled with a heavy pressure. A sense of fear that seemed to come from the soul rushed up to the heart. It made one completely unable to raise any thoughts of resistance. Everyone else was like this. But Lone Moon, who belonged to the same plane, completely could not control himself. With a thud, he fell to the ground. Holy shit. Why is it him again? Fu*K. Lone Moon felt his heart getting heavier and heavier. It was as if it was going to explode in the next moment. Older sister. Xining stepped forward and blocked in front of Father Niu. Suddenly, as if breaking something, the pressure around them disappeared. Even Xinjing took a step back. Little Ing. She looked at the man in front of her in disbelief. I told you, the man said. She's no longer under the jurisdiction of your plane. Xinjing was stunned. Everyone else present also looked confused. They had no idea what they were talking about. Even Zhu Yao was at a loss and had no choice but to give Guogua, who was at the side, a pleading look. To put it simply, what's wrong with her? Guogua asked. Yes, my wife, the man replied immediately. He held Guogua's hand and said, that means it's not her body that's changed. It's her existence itself that's changed. And it's the kind that even we managers can't understand. What do you mean? Let's put it this way. If everything in the plane is of the same level, and the manager is a higher existence than the plane, that means our manager's ability is above all the living things in this plane. I know that, Shining answered. The man continued, do you remember what your body's first reaction was after you transmigrated? Shining tilted her head. Hungry? That's right. He nodded. You're Xinjing's assistant and her younger sister. Your body is more inclined towards the managers. Your older sister has been training you to become a manager. But the moment you transmigrated, your body was at a critical point. This point was the opportunity for you to become a manager. In the end, the moment you transmigrated, the power of the two planes was added to your body. That changed your existence, causing you to jump 2 levels. And it consumed a lot of energy. That's why you became hungry. You're saying that I became a manager? Shining was stunned. No, you accumulated 2 portions of plane power, he said seriously. Not just as a manager but as, you surpassed the manager, Xinjing said directly. If managers are said to be higher than the plane, the man said slowly, you're now higher than the manager. Everyone, so this was what the previous boss meant. Chapter 293. Shining and the others came with a confused look on their faces, and they also returned with a confused look on their faces. Lone Moon finally knew what was going on with Xin Ying's terrifying power. No wonder, no matter whether it was immortals, gods, or fiends, even those infinitely close to managing fiend celestials, they could not do anything to her. Even the realm gates that ordinary people could not cross, she could easily tear them apart with her bare hands. She was not on the same level as them at all, although he did not know what the so-called plane power superposition meant. But thinking about it carefully, the difference between her and them should be the same as the difference between a 3-dimensional person and a 2-dimensional paper doll. But couldn't she just tear it apart with her bare hands? No matter how beautiful the paper was, it was still paper. He felt that he needed some time to recover. Xinjing did not intend to stay any longer. After understanding the situation, she directly opened the plane gate and planned to go back. Shining, on the other hand, looked calm as she nibbled on her fruit, as if she did not feel the arrogance on her body at all. Chef. Lone Moon nudged the person beside him who was in a daze. Let's go. I Ching nodded, turned back to look at Yu Yen who was hugging Zhu Yao, and then followed the few of them through the plane passage. So they were also master and disciple. Little Ing, I can't help you in your current situation. Xinjing sighed and looked at the person in front of her with some worry. Suddenly, she did not know whether Xin Ying's situation was a good thing or a bad thing. You just work hard to adapt. Oh. Shining nodded, indicating that she did not feel anything at all. Regarding your transmigration, I'm still investigating the reason. She frowned as if thinking of something. You said that you were playing a primitive game when you transmigrated, right? Primitive? Father Nyo felt like he was shot by an arrow. Seeing her nod, Xinjing continued. I'll investigate according to this clue. Your current situation is not suitable to deal with the matters of this plane. Your vacation will continue to be extended indefinitely. Yes, sister, no problem, sister. Xinying's eyes brightened. I have something to do, I'll leave first, I'll be back in 3 days. With that said, she directly opened a space transmission wanting to go in, but then she turned back and added, don't cause trouble. With that said, she disappeared. Xinying's back, which had been straightened all this while, relaxed instantly. She returned to her usual lazy self. Suddenly he walked to the computer and picked up 2 familiar-looking wristbands. He turned around and handed one to Chef and the other to himself. His eyes were shining as he looked at Lone Moon. Father Nyo, let's go play. Scram. Apart from eating, sleeping, and playing, can you do anything else? Shining sighed and did not mind. Chef, let's go. Just as she was about to activate the wristband, I Ching handed the wristband back to her in surprise. His eyes darkened and many emotions flashed across his face. It was as if he had been suppressing them for a long time and was about to explode. Master, ha. Shining paused. He clenched his fists by his side as if he had made up his mind. He suddenly stood up and looked at her with a serious expression that he had never shown before. He took 2 steps back and bowed to her with a loud thud. He bowed to her respectfully. What are you doing? Shining was shocked. Even Lone Moon beside her looked over. I Ching's expression became more determined. He looked straight at her and said loudly, "Your disciple has a question. I hope Master can answer it." What question?" Shining was shocked by his serious expression. "You don't have to be so serious, do you? Get up first. This matter has been pressing on your disciple's heart for many years. I hope that Master can listen to this disciple's words." After saying that, he once again kowtowed to her, knocking on the ground with a dong sound. All right, I'll listen, all right?" Suddenly it was so scary. "Go ahead. Your disciple's fortune in this life is to have Master as my master. I've been attaining the great Tao along the way." Only then did he say each word very seriously. "In your disciple's heart, Master is the person who guided my life. From the moment I entered the sect, I placed Master in my heart. Nothing else can compare to my importance. I followed Master for many years. I've always done my duty as a disciple. I've never slacked off. I've always been proud of being able to enter the sect. It's just that as time went by, your disciple realized that there were many delusions in my heart. In the past I didn't realize it. Now, it's because I'm not willing to cut them off." He clenched his fists by his side, looking so ashamed that he wanted to die. Shining subconsciously asked, "What is it?" His whole body shook as if he couldn't continue speaking. After a while he raised his head and gathered his courage to say, "As a disciple, it's my duty to bring glory to the sect, and to help the world. But I don't want to. I'm selfish. I don't want Master to have disciples all over the world. I don't want Master to have other disciples. I don't want anyone to take a step closer to Master. I don't want Master to leave my sight. These delusions have been born for a long time. I can't cut them off. Your disciple wants to be by Master's side forever. I want to accompany Master at all times. I want Master to only have me as his disciple. I want Master to have no one else by his side. I want Master to never leave me again. Master taught me the right way. But I have delusions that give birth to demons. I've let down Master. But no matter how hard I try, I still can't suppress these delusions. In the thousands of years that I've been looking for Master, I've completely fallen into them. The more I resist, the deeper the delusions get. I can only ask Master to enlighten me. I don't want to be separated from Master again. I want Master to be mine." Pui, Lone Moon, who had heard the whole story, could not help but spit out the drink in his mouth. He let out a maniacal laugh but choked again. Instantly he coughed like he had tuberculosis. As he coughed, he pressed on his chest. But he did not forget to give I Ching a thumbs up. "Ah, cough cough cough. Brother, your righteous confession is really awesome. 2F** King awesome." This was the first time he had seen such a serious yet refreshing and unpretentious confession. "I'm almost moved by you." "What do you mean?" I Ching frowned. "I didn't expect that, chef. You have such skills to flirt with girls. It's just that you chose the wrong time." With that said, his laughter became louder and louder. He laughed so hard that he bent over. I Ching's expression turned cold. He said even more sternly, "Every word I say comes from the bottom of my heart. I'm not lying. Fellow Taoist Lone Moon, please don't take it as a joke." "Oh, he's even calling me fellow Taoist. It looks like he's really angry." "I'm sincerely asking Master to enlighten me. I want to dispel these delusions so that I don't make a huge mistake. If I've lost my balance in the past, I'll ask Master to punish me." "Punish? Wait." Lone Moon suddenly thought of a possibility. He looked at Chef as if he was an alien. "Don't tell me you really don't understand. You actually like Shining? You want to woo her, right?" "What? He likes Master." Chapter 294. What? I Ching was stunned as if he had just started to think about this. After a while he seemed to wake up. His serious face seemed to explode, quickly turning red, replaced by a look of panic. I like Master?" His eyes subconsciously glanced at the person in front, but before he could meet the other's eyes, his head dropped like a child who had done something wrong. His feelings towards Master, so it turned out to be, he liked Master. If liking meant being with Master forever, then it should be liking. "Hey, you really don't know." Lone Moon clicked his tongue. He didn't even know and directly confessed. This move, one look and he could tell that it was a first. That Master. I Ching's whole body shrunk. His impassioned look of asking for answers was instantly like a punctured ball. He peeked at Shining with some trepidation and cautiousness. Hey, say something. Lone Moon gave Shining a push. Say what? Shining coughed. Chef's sudden move really made her a little confused. She felt a little nervous for no reason. He's stupid, you're stupid too? Lone Moon directly rolled his eyes. Give me an explanation whether he's dead or alive. With that said, he added, I'm telling you, you won't find someone as good at cooking as Chef. No matter what, they were brothers who had fought together before. He had to give them a push out of friendship. Sigh, so troublesome. Dating and whatnot. Troublesome my ass. Chef. Shining then turned to look at I Ching seriously. I Ching stiffened, as if still immersed in the truth exposed by Lone Moon. But he couldn't help but secretly look at her with a red face. Master. Have you thought clearly about what you want to say to me? I Ching was stunned. A trace of confusion flashed across his eyes. His whole body was in a daze. He lowered his head and didn't reply for a long time. Shining sighed. Then that's it for now. We'll talk when you've thought it through. She waved her hand, planning to end the meeting. It's almost noon. It's time to have lunch. With that said, she stood up and was just about to ask Chef to get to work. I like Master. He suddenly opened his mouth as if he had figured something out. His voice was even louder than before. He looked up straight into Shen Ying's eyes. His face was already as red as a tomato, but he still said word by word, if the idea of having Master as my own in my heart means that I like you, then I would like you to be my Master. Then disciple likes Master a long time ago I like and only like Master. Shining, Lone Moon, holy shit, this confession is even better. After a long time, but I might not like you very much. Lone Moon felt a little cold these few days. Ever since Chef's unexpected confession seemed to have failed. Although the two of them didn't seem to have any difference, the one who should be playing games was playing games, and the one who should be cooking was cooking. However, he felt that there was a low pressure in the room. As an onlooker, Lone Moon felt a little suffocated. Especially when she accidentally caught sight of Chef's infinitely sorrowful gaze. More importantly, hey, aren't you going to do something about it? Lone Moon pointed at the busy figure in the kitchen. Do what? Shining was stunned. What else can it be? Lone Moon rolled his eyes at her. Chef, he's starting to cook again. Is it strange that he's cooking? He's Chef. It's not strange that he's cooking, but there's no need to cook more than 10 meals a day, right? Lone Moon pointed at the table full of dishes. Since that day, Chef had never left the kitchen. He had been cooped up in there to cook. He had seen people who got drunk after falling out of love, but he had never seen someone who kept cooking after falling out of love. It was also very hard for him to buy groceries, okay? I said I'm full, but he won't stop. Shining spread her hands. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something. Oh yes, Father Nyo, remember to pay for the gas. Get lost. He glared at her. After a while, he couldn't help but ask, do you really not have any feelings for Chef? A little, I guess. If you do, then go for it. Lone Moon said. When did you become such a wishy-washy person? Didn't she see that Chef's heart was broken? Shining turned to glance at him. He's different. How is he different? Lone Moon looked confused. He couldn't figure it out before. Don't tell me you can't see it? All these years, everyone can see that he has feelings for you. He's about to dig his heart out for you. That's why, it's different. Shining frowned and let out a long sigh. I am indeed a little interested in him, but it's just a little. I don't know how long it will last and I don't know when it will be over. If a relationship is destined to fail from the start, it's better not to start. Lone Moon was shocked. He gave her a strange look. You're afraid that if you break up in the future, you'll hurt Chef's heart. Shen Ying's eyes turned. Think so? Are you sick? Lone Moon suddenly reached out and touched her head. You don't have a fever. You're already full. Why did your IQ drop? Get lost. Shen Ying slapped his hand away. What happened to all those big principles that you used to trick me? Why aren't you taking them out now? Lone Moon rolled his eyes at her. Do you know what you're doing now? You're being spoiled. He finally threw the word back at her face. Instantly, his whole body felt refreshed. Is there anyone like you who breaks up as soon as they start dating? How do you know that you'll definitely break up with Chef in the future? Although things like relationships are quite unreliable, not everything will be replaced by time. I know that compared to you, Chef is indeed more affectionate and more persistent. You know that and Chef knows that too. But when two people are together, it's not like they're competing in martial arts. Who's more and who's less? You're only thinking about what will happen if you break up in the future? Why don't you think about how much happiness you'll get when you're together? No, I'm afraid. You're afraid that you'll hurt his heart in the future, but now he's hurt too. But, aren't you saying that no one can predict what will happen in the future? If you don't go and torment yourself, who knows what will happen? Why are you not willing to torment yourself when it comes to relationships? Alright, as long as you're happy. When did you become such a pessimistic coward? In the past. Before he could finish, Shining suddenly stood up, giving him a fright. You mean, you want me to accept it first? Yes, what are you afraid of? Alright. Father Nyo paused. He suddenly had a bad feeling. Chapter 295. Shining scanned him from head to toe and suddenly gave him a strange look. She seemed to have thought of something. A moment later, her expression changed and her eyes brightened. Father Nyo, you're right. I've decided to listen to you. She agreed just like that? We agreed. Father Nyo was the one who asked me to agree to this. What? Agreed on what? Agreed on what? So if anything really happens in the future, you have to bear the responsibility bravely? What do you mean? Lone Moon was confused. Bear the responsibility bravely? Can you explain yourself? Shining, however, did not reply. She hurried into the kitchen and pulled Chef out excitedly. Master? Chef was also confused. Is there something urgent? Come back to the room with me and talk about life. I Ching was stunned. What does Master want to say? Let's talk on the bed. With that said, she pushed the door open and threw Chef onto the bed. The next moment, there was a loud bang and the door was slammed shut. Lone Moon, hey, control yourselves. Mind your image. Do you have to be so wild in broad daylight? And the big light bulb was still on. He did not want to hear any discordant voices. Before I Ching could react, Shining had already leaned over. She was so close that she was almost touching his body. Mas. He panicked. Before he could speak, Shin Ying's slightly cold voice suddenly sounded beside his ear. Chef, I have a way to go back to the other world. I Ching was stunned. His eyes widened. He could go back. Master, together? He asked anxiously. Shining nodded and leaned closer. But, you might have to suffer. All right. I haven't said anything and you've agreed? I believe everything Master says. Shining stiffened. She looked away uncomfortably. After a while she said in a low voice, in theory my sister will never agree to me leaving this plane. If I bring it up there will only be one result. What? She will break my leg or both of your legs. Unless I have the ability to be independent. Independent? He was stunned. Master was so powerful and they had tested her ability in the superplane. Wasn't that considered independent? My family's calculation is different. The corner of Shin Ying's mouth twitched. The independence that my older sister is referring to, the kind that has a family and a career. I Ching stared blankly for a moment before he understood what she meant. He nodded and said, I will cooperate with Master. But, let me say this first. I have no intention to play with your feelings. Shin Ying explained awkwardly, you're very good. I do like you a little but not to that extent. Feelings are not necessary for me and I don't have any plans to fall in love. So, compared to being my boyfriend, I'm more used to you being my chef. Master. I Ching suddenly interrupted her. His eyes seemed to be filled with tears. I know. I have never wanted to change anything. This is good enough. This was a beautiful dream that he could not even dream of in the 3,000 years that seemed to be frozen in time. He had nothing else to ask for. But, Master, can you promise me one thing? Yes. No matter what Master decides, I will always be Master's disciple and chef. But if one day Master plans to fall in love, can you consider me first? Shining was stunned. A while later, all right. A while later. Master. Yes. Why do we have to discuss this under the covers? My older sister will hear us. So, Master is lying on top of me. Can't she hear us? Didn't she just sit on top of him? Another, half a while later. Master. Yes. Will your older sister really break our legs? Don't worry. Father Nyo is here. She will break him first. Then, she will not have the strength to hit us. Recently, Lone Moon kept feeling a chill on his back. Even if he used his immortal chi, he could not alleviate it. What's more, his right eyelid kept twitching. He kept feeling that something big was going to happen. Perhaps it was because the plane did not match. No matter how he tried, he could not figure out what was wrong. Chef and Xining seemed to be together, but they did not look like they were dating. Xining was still playing games every day, looking as lazy as mud. Chef was still the same chef. Every time he looked at Xining, his gaze became more focused, as if he had thought something through. He did not cook more than 10 meals a day. The two of them seemed to be no different from before. It made him wonder if it was his imagination that day when Xining pulled Yi Qing into her room and did not come out for half a day. You two are really together? It did not look like it at all. In order to avoid any awkward situations, he even planned to buy the suite opposite Xinjing's house. Yet that night, Chef still slept in his room. He did not have any intention of moving over to Xinjing's side. Xining was stunned. She turned to look at him. Then she hooked her finger at Yi Qing, who was carrying fruits. Chef, come here. Master. Yi Qing had not put down the fruits he had just cut. He looked up at her in confusion. Xining suddenly reached out and grabbed his collar. She pulled him over and planted a kiss on his lips. But Yi Qing stiffened. The fruits in his hands fell to the ground and his face turned red. Then she turned to Lone Moon. Is that okay? Was this considered showing off? Lone Moon was about to mock her when a thud came from the side. A figure fell down and hit the ground. In the next moment, Xinjing, who had been missing for a few days, appeared in front of them. Lone Moon, Yi Qing, Xining, who was still grabbing Yi Qing's collar. Her cold gaze swept across the three of them. Xinjing's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The temperature dropped. For a moment, the whole house was silent. As if he had a flash of inspiration, Lone Moon suddenly understood the reason for the chills he had been feeling these few days. And what did Xining mean by what she said before? He had been watching too much drama these days. He had completely forgotten that Xining had a demon king at home. And a demon king with a sister complex. Lone Moon could vaguely hear the sound of a bell ringing. Two words popped up in his mind. They started to appear endlessly. I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Chapter 296. Half an hour later. Xinjing looked at the three people standing in front of her like quails. Her face seemed to be covered with a thick layer of ice. In other words, you're with this fellow from the other world? Xining trembled and made a weak sound. Yes. You still want to go back to that plane with him? Yes. She glanced at Lone Moon. Or are you the matchmaker? Lone Moon shuddered. Really? Very good. Xinjing took a deep breath as if trying hard to suppress something. Come over here. Before Lone Moon could react, he felt his collar tighten. His whole body was pulled over and dragged into the room. In the next moment, screams came from inside the room. Wait, why me? What does it have to do with me? Ow. Wait, what are you doing? Put it down. Oh. Xining, you heartless bastard. How dare you feed my sister poisoned chicken soup and kidnap her to another plane? I'll beat you to death. Xining and Yi Qing were left behind, hugging each other and trembling. Father Niu will be filial to you in the future. Another half an hour passed. Father Niu, are you still alive? Lone Moon covered his swollen face and sucked in a cold breath. You freaking did it on purpose. Ouch, damn it. She already knew that Xinjing would not agree to let her go back to the immortal cultivation plane. That was why she did not hesitate to agree to Chef's request. She was afraid that Xinjing would get angry, so she asked him to share the burden. Don't mind these details. She had already beaten him up. Big sister, calm down. Chef, hurry and treat Father Niu's wounds. Yes, master, no problem, master. Get lost. Break off all ties, definitely break off all ties. Big sister, this is. Xining pointed to the other figure beside Father Niu, who did not look human at all, and asked carefully. The mastermind behind your transmigration to another plane. Xinjing, who had finally calmed down, looked at the two people on the ground and snorted. Instantly the two of them trembled. Xining took a closer look and realized that the man looked familiar. She paused. Kai Tian. Little Ling. The person who was beaten up even worse looked up timidly as if he wanted to smile, but it pulled at the wounds on his face, making it even more difficult to tell that he was human. Lone Moon paused. It was only then that he noticed the other person on the ground. For a moment he did not understand what Xinjing meant. Wasn't this Kai Tian her other assistant? Was he the one who dragged her and Xining to the other world? You're a divine being, Yi Qing suddenly said. What? Lone Moon was shocked. He took a closer look and indeed he saw a trace of God power around the other party. However, it seemed to be concealed by something. If he did not look closely he would not be able to see it. I'm indeed from that world. Kai Tian chuckled and glanced at Xinjing. Seeing that she had no intention of objecting, he conjured a seal to soothe the wounds on his face. Littling, I'm sorry. I was the one who forcefully sent you to that world. What? Xinjing asked. I had no choice. He looked like he was about to burst into tears. There is no manager in that world. As time passes, it will all collapse one day. I thought of many ways to no avail, until I came to this world by chance. Xinjing trained you to be a manager since you were young. That's why I thought that perhaps you could become the manager of that world. You want Xinjing to take over that world? Yes. He nodded. But I did not think that you would undergo a change in your body during the transmigration. I heard from Xinjing that you're already in existence that transcends the plane. This proves that you're destined to be the manager of our plane. Ha! Xinjing snorted. You mean to say that my little sister, whom I've worked so hard to raise, should take over your mess? No. Boss, that's not what I meant. Kai Tian was instantly terrified. He glanced at Xinjing weakly. Our plane is very fragile. Once the three of us disappear, it will really be gone. 3? Yiqing paused. Then, as if recalling something, his eyes widened. You're the god of creation. The last of the 3 ancient gods. You've heard of me? Kai Tian paused. We've met the other 2. Lone Moon frowned. They were the ones who sent Xinjing and me back. He thought for a moment, then added, the ones who couldn't wait to chase us away. What? Kai Tian stood up abruptly. Those 2 bastards are useless teammates. I was wondering why Littling came back so quickly. Boss didn't even notice before she came back. Kai Tian's heart sank. In order not to let Xinjing find out, he purposely hid his plane information and did not contact the other side. He did not expect that the manager he had found with so much difficulty would be sent back by his useless teammates. He had thought that Xinjing would definitely have feelings for the other world after so many years. Although Xinjing would definitely pull her back, he could try to persuade her when the time came. That way the chances of success would be much higher. Although Xinjing was not the real manager and might not be able to withstand the power of the plane, she had Xinjing behind her. If anything went wrong, Xinjing would definitely help. He had thought of all the possible scenarios, but in the end, his plans were ruined by his own people. Was there anything more frustrating than this? Kai Tian felt like his heart had died. If I had known, I would have. You would have what? Xinjing suddenly spoke. Are you saying that if I hadn't found out, you wouldn't have sent her back? Kai Tian trembled and immediately knelt down again. I was wrong, boss. Kai Tian, have I been too lenient towards you? Have you forgotten whose plane this is? Xinjing's voice turned cold. Suddenly, a terrifying aura emanated from her body. Kai Tian, who had been kneeling obediently a moment ago, seemed to be pressed down by something. His entire body fell to the ground and he spat out blood. What does the life and death of your plane have to do with my sister? What right does she have to help you? Boss. Kai Tian's eyes widened, but he could not say a word. Don't forget, if I can take you in as my assistant, I can also fire you. She seemed to be really angry. The moment she finished speaking, there was a loud crack. The ground beneath Kai Tian split open. A white light suddenly appeared on his forehead, as if something was about to fly out. Older sister. Xinjing had no choice but to step forward and stand between the 2 of them. Xinjing paused. The light on Kai Tian's forehead dimmed. I'm the one who fired him. Why did you rush out? Xinjing glanced at her. She seemed to have thought of something and her expression darkened. You're not really going to take over that stupid plane, are you? Chapter 297. Xinjing looked over and hesitated for a while before saying, Elder sister, I want to go back there. I don't agree. Xinjing objected directly. You're not allowed to go anywhere other than this plane. Sit down. Xinjing did not move. She repeated, Elder sister, I want to go over. I said no means no. Her brows furrowed. Do you know how dangerous it is to take over a plane? Have you forgotten how many times you've been attacked by malicious invaders since you were young? I haven't forgotten. Then you still dare to go? Let's not talk about whether you can handle the invasion. What if you get rejected by the plane? That probability is too low. It won't happen? Who says it won't? What if it really happens? It'll be too late for you to regret. Elder sister, you're not allowed to go. But, you can't stop me. Xinjing's face paled for a moment. Then she turned to look at Xinjing in disbelief. A hint of pain flashed across her eyes. What did you just say? Say it again? Shining clenched her fists by her side. She stepped forward and held her hands with both hands before saying, Elder sister, I'm not a child anymore. You don't have to protect me anymore. I'm already stronger than you. Xinjing faltered. She stared at her for a while before taking a deep breath. She paced back and forth in the living room a few times, as if trying desperately to hold back something. After a while she stopped and walked back to Shining. You really must go. Yes. All right. She turned and sat down on the sofa. Her whole body relaxed as if something had been removed. She leaned back on the sofa. I promised you that when you're independent, I won't bother you with everything anymore. Just think about it carefully. With that said, her gaze was like an icy knife, stabbing straight at Chef beside her. And you're right. With your current abilities, I really can't stop you. The little sister she raised with so much difficulty was about to fly away with someone else. She really wanted to kill that bastard who kidnapped her. But think about it carefully. With your current abilities, you can control any plane. Even if you want to create a new one, you can. Are you sure you want to go back to that world? She turned to glare at Kay on the ground and said, Not even a manager has been there before. Who knows how many traps are waiting for you? Actually, you don't have to worry. Little Ing already dealt with the biggest problem last time. Kai Tian was still lying on the ground pretending to be a quail when his eyes lit up. He immediately said, Plus, I can help too. Xinjing snorted coldly. You speak as if you can escape from under my nose. Super Kai Tian coward immediately shrank back. I can bring Father Nyo and Chef along, Shining said. He's more useful than Kai Tian. Kai Tian? Fine, he was stabbed in the back again. He can. Xinjing pointed at the person who had occupied her kitchen the moment he arrived, then looked at Lone Moon. But he is originally from this world. If he goes to your side, it would more or less affect the plane. What if I become the manager's assistant? Shining asked. Assistant? She frowned and turned to look at the traitor Kai Tian on the ground. Becoming an assistant could indeed change the ownership of the plane. Think carefully. You can only have 2 assistants and you can't change them. If not for this reason, she would have beaten Kai Tian to death. Shining nodded vigorously. Having Father Nyo is enough. She could already see her permanent vacation waving at her. Lone Moon, who was suddenly affirmed. Shining was saying this to get them to go back to that world, wasn't she? She definitely was, right? Why did she suddenly have a bad feeling about this? Forget it. Your current abilities have already surpassed the existence of the plane. I can't control you anymore. You can decide for yourself. But before that, she turned and began to stare daggers at Kai Tian. Then she kicked him. Since Little Ing has already decided to take over the plane, I won't pursue what you did previously. But you better settle the mess on your side otherwise. Yes, boss. No problem, boss. Kai Tian immediately straightened his back. He felt as if he had been hit by a pie. This was great. Their plane finally had a manager. His years of hard work had not gone to waste. He was so happy that he wanted to cry. Asterisk 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 asterisk. Lone Moon never thought that they would be able to return to the immortal cultivation world so soon. What's more, Shining had become the manager of that world. In other words, he could do whatever he wanted in the 3 realms. Although it seemed like it was the same in the past, being able to return to a familiar place made him excited for no reason. Xinjing merely drew a line in the air and opened a white passageway. Large amounts of familiar immortal chi surged towards them. They could faintly see the familiar scene inside. She was the manager of the plane after all. She was on a completely different level from the plane door that Godfiend opened. In the blink of an eye, they returned to Godfiend's divine realm. Kai Tian's real name was Kai Tian. He was indeed the last of the 3 great ancient gods who created the world. Perhaps he had suffered too much from Xinjing, but once he returned to the divine realm, he pulled Godfiend and Mengpa to scold them non-stop for 3 hours. He scolded the 2 of them like they were his grandchildren. Actually, this was entirely because the 2 of them had mistaken him for someone else. Kai Tian had transmigrated to another plane to find a suitable manager. He had transmigrated to many planes until he arrived at Xinjing's world and found Shining. That was why he used some tricks to hide his original plane. He made Xinjing think that he could not return and kept him as an assistant. He secretly connected the 2 worlds and wanted to send Shining over. But Xinjing was a siscon and had always kept a close eye on her. He never found a chance. Until Shining went on vacation. But it was during this period of time that Godfiend, who had been waiting in the original world for a long time, predicted that Lone Moon could solve the crisis in the demon world. Coincidentally, because of Kai Tian's preparations, the plane could be connected. That was why he thought that Lone Moon was the manager that Kai Tian had chosen and directly pulled him over. But Lone Moon had cultivated for hundreds of years and completely did not display the ability to control planes. In addition, Kai Tian did not respond. Godfiend was completely disappointed with the manager. In addition, after Xin Ying transmigrated, she had always treated this world as a vacation. She did not reveal any of her abilities in terms of planes. In addition, Xin Ying changed when she transmigrated. Even they could not predict her limits. This made Godfiend feel threatened and treated her as an intruder. He found a chance to kick Xin Ying out of the plane together with Lone Moon after resolving the crisis in the demon world. Lone Moon wanted to beat Godfiend up, but on account that Kai Tian had already made a move, he endured it. After Kai Tian gave his instructions, he returned to the other plane. He had already accepted Xin Jing's assistant seal. Even though he was originally a creation god here, he no longer belonged to this plane. That was why he could only go back and continue working for Xin Jing. He might also have to add in Xin Ying's previous job. Chapter 298. Boss, we've been waiting for you for a long time. You're finally here. The Godfiend, who knew the truth, blinked his eyes like stars. He looked at Xin Ying with sparkling eyes. He no longer had the fake look from before. He looked very obedient. Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Wait my ass. He was the one who kicked them back to the plane. Sect Master, I knew you'd be different. Meng Pe, who was basically implicated by the Godfiend, looked excited. Boss, I was blind not to recognize you before. In the future, we'll be at your beck and call and fight for a harmonious and perfect 3 realms for life. Sect Master, under your leadership, our 3 realms will definitely prosper and become better. Boss, all living beings in the 3 realms will become one. Sect Master, the glory plane will grow and multiply. Xin Ying, I Ching, Lone Moon, enough, the 2 of you became heaven-splitting ancient gods through flattery, right? Xin Ying. Lone Moon nudged the person beside him. Didn't Xin Jing tell you to come over and bind the plane first before you can be considered as the manager of this world? You should know how to operate it, right? Xin Ying's hand that was chewing on the fruit paused. Without Xin Jing's suppression, she returned to her lazy self. Wow. You can begin. Only by binding the plane would one have the ability to open the plane door freely. And according to Xin Jing, taking over the plane was very dangerous. He could not help but feel nervous. Xin Ying nodded. She took a few steps forward lazily and closed her eyes. In less than 2 seconds, she opened them again. It's done. What? It's done? What happened to the promised danger? What happened to the what if? Xin Ying nodded. This was too fast. There was no lightning or any special effects. At the very least, they should have signed a contract, right? Was the binding of the plane too casual, or was this plane too immoral? Oh yes. Xin Ying suddenly thought of something. She turned to the Godfiend. Do you have a pen and paper? Yes. The Godfiend immediately nodded his head like a chick pecking at grains. With a wave of his hand, an illusion instantly materialized in front of him, along with a table and chairs. He smiled even more radiantly and said, Boss, please? Xin Ying walked over and sat down. She picked up the brush and started writing. After a while, she picked up the 2 pieces of paper and handed one over. What's this? Lone Moon subconsciously took it. Proof of you and Chef's assistance. Lone Moon stared blankly at it. He read it carefully several times before he recognized what was written on the paper. I hereby hire Mr. Father Nyo to be the assistant plane manager of Q23333 Immortal Spirit Plane, and hereby grant this certificate. Plane Management Committee *year *month *day? Winky face, what the hell? So the position of a manager's assistant was also this casual. Just a piece of paper? Also, what was this brush writing that looked like a dog crawling? If you don't know how to use a brush, can't you make a fountain pen? And to hell with Father Nyo. Lone Moon was about to spew out his complaints. In the next moment, the paper in his hand suddenly lit up. A blinding golden light instantly enveloped his entire body. In the next moment, he felt a chill on his forehead. An unfamiliar symbol suddenly floated out of his body. It was an infinity symbol in the shape of an inverted figure 8. He didn't have time to think about what it was. Suddenly, those black words that looked like a dog crawling on the paper floated up. As if they were alive, they surrounded that symbol, getting tighter and tighter. With a ding sound, that symbol seemed to be crushed. It disappeared along with those words. Lone Moon only felt his entire body relax. As if there was something he didn't understand, but the connection that had been binding him was directly broken. In the next moment, the immortal power that was originally abundant in his body flowed out of his body like water. His cultivation also fell rapidly. From the original young emperor cultivation, it fell all the way to the bottom. Even Qi Refinement's endurance could not compare. He clenched his fists. But he didn't feel much like he had become immortal again. Instead, he felt like he was omnipotent. As if as long as he wanted, all the 3,000 worlds would be in front of his eyes. Even the God Fiend and Mengpa beside him, who he thought had unfathomably high cultivation, were just like elementary school students in his eyes. The difference was only between them and middle school students. Apart from Xining, who still had a lazy expression on her face. She still looked like an ordinary person, but for some reason, an illusion of being unable to resist arose in his heart. So this was the manager's assistant? It felt like he had the authority of a GM. Lone Moon was a little confused. He turned to look at Yi Qing, who was also holding a piece of paper. Chef, you? He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes widened. Holy shit. In contrast to his relaxed expression, Chef's face was pale. He was sweating profusely. An infinity symbol also appeared on his body. But for some reason, the words on Xin Ying's letter of appointment only wrapped around that symbol. They did not directly crush it. And the longer time passed, the paler Chef's face became. Even his body seemed to be unstable. He fell straight down. Xining helped him sit down. She looked at the infinity symbol that was still floating on his forehead. Her eyes turned cold. She turned to look at the God Fiend behind her. What did you do to him? This meant that the rules of the plane were binding him. The God Fiend's whole body trembled. His legs turned to jelly. He could not help but kneel down. Boss, this has nothing to do with me. He chose to transmigrate on his own. I couldn't stop him. Sect Master. Mengpa looked conflicted. Elder Yi Qing, in order to transmigrate to find you, he used up all his cultivation to open the plane gate. Now that his body is about to collapse, of course he can't withstand the manager's seal. What? Lone Moon exclaimed, his face full of disbelief. He transmigrated on his own. Wasn't it the God Fiend who opened the plane gate? We don't have the ability to open the plane gate at any time, the God Fiend said weakly. The God Fiend said weakly. Otherwise, he would not have waited so long to send Xining and Lone Moon back. What's more, there's a manager on that side. It was already very hard for him not to be discovered. But Xining clearly helped him repair his body. When Chef first transmigrated, he indeed looked like he was on his last breath. But Xining clearly used that healing device to heal him. What's more, when they went to that dead star, he even transformed into a phoenix. Nothing seemed to happen to him. Why did he suddenly become like this when he came back? This is the difference between planes. He doesn't belong to that plane, the God Fiend continued. Because there was no manager before, even if you healed him on that plane once he returned to this world, he would still change back to how he was before he left. Chapter 299. Lone Moon looked down. Indeed, streaks of blood appeared on Chef's body, as if something was cutting into his body. The glaring red even stained Xinying's clothes. He had seen Chef's injuries before. With the power of this plane, there was no way he could heal them. Then I'll create a new body for him. It was just a body. Given his current abilities, it was not difficult at all. No. Xining rejected him directly. What? He already has the assistant seal on him. Xining glanced at the ball of black words. It's not his own body. The seal will reject him. And the seal could not be taken back. Reject? Lone Moon paused. Reject his body. Wouldn't that mean he can only be a floater in the future? Shit. Shinjing said before that there could only be 2 assistants, and they could not be removed. That meant that Xining could not take back the seal. Then what do we do? Actually, there is a solution. The God Fiend raised his claws. Speak, what solution? The God Fiend immediately said, his body is only injured. He can go to the mortal realm and reincarnate into a new body. The reincarnated body belonged to him. Isn't that obvious? Lone Moon rolled his eyes. Who didn't know that? But, I'm not going. Chef retorted directly. He grabbed Xinying's hand. Reincarnation has to go through the river of forgetfulness. I will forget everything, forget Master. If I don't remember. His face grew paler. Even his breathing was faintly discernible. He paused for a while before finishing his sentence. If I don't remember, then, when master is hungry, who will cook? What if he was famished? What if other people did not make it to his taste? Lone Moon, Shining, the God Fiend, Mengpa, flips table. Degree, is the main point cooking? You're about to die and you're still thinking about cooking. How professional are you? Shining did not find a manager assistant. This was a damn nanny. Don't you have any other way? The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Putting aside the matter of cooking, if Chef entered the cycle of reincarnation and forgot everything in the past, would he still be the same chef? Actually, you don't have to forget, the God Fiend said weakly. What do you mean? Wasn't it said that once one's soul entered the river of forgetfulness, all memories of their past lives would be erased and they wouldn't be able to remember anything? As long as Mengpa personally brings him to the lower realm to be reincarnated. He turned to look at Mengpa beside him. Granny Meng was stunned. She seemed to recall something and nodded repeatedly. That's right. I can send him down. This way we won't have to go through the river of forgetfulness and our memories won't be erased. There's no need for that, Shining suddenly said. The few of them turned to look at her. Shining raised her hand and pointed at the assistant imprint that was wrapped up in front of him. In the next moment, the imprint sank directly into Chef's forehead. Chef's body also began to emit a white light, getting brighter and brighter. In a short while his entire body was wrapped in white light. Master. I Ching panicked and grabbed Xinying's hand. I'll look for you. Xining looked straight at him. I Ching's expression changed. After a long while he slowly let go. In a short while he was completely wrapped up in the ball of light. His body also began to become smaller and smaller. Xining raised her hand and he flew out. In a short while he disappeared. Where did you send him? Lone Moon was stunned. Nothing much? I just returned to the lower realm. Huh? What did she mean? Xining did not answer. She only turned back to look at the God Fiend. Next. It was time to settle scores. The God Fiend suddenly felt his entire body become heavy. A huge pressure covered the sky and covered the earth. He could not even think of resisting. The God Fiend directly knelt down. Although he did not have a physical body, his body distorted as if he was going to disappear in the next moment. Xining walked towards him step by step. With every step she took, the pressure around her increased. Her voice was not as lazy as before. She said word by word, Indeed, I won't feel good if I don't beat you up. Wait, boss. The God Fiend hurriedly shouted for mercy. I can explain. I didn't know it would be like this. Help. Before he could finish speaking, Xinying's fist had already landed. In a moment, the entire divine realm reverberated with his tragic cries. Xining was probably really furious this time. She did not hold back at all. Even the entire divine realm cracked and cracked, not to mention the God Fiend who was facing her anger. It was a tragic sight. Anyone who heard it would feel sad. Anyone who saw it would cry. So, Lone Moon directly turned his head away. He chose not to look. Xining beat the God Fiend for a whole half an hour. This was the highest she had ever beaten before she stopped. There was not a single piece of uninjured flesh on the God Fiend's body. Lone Moon did not know what she had done, but the God Fiend's injuries could not be healed using sorcery. He could only lie on the ground crying out in pain. This was definitely the worst that the God Fiend had ever been in. If not for the fact that Chef was already in the lower realm, Xining probably would not have stopped. Let's go. Xining opened up a path and waved at Father Nyo. Sect Master Elder Lone Moon, why don't I send you off? Mengpa, who had been watching the whole time, hurriedly suggested. I'm the most familiar with things in the lower realm. I can find people right away. Lone Moon was about to reply when Xining beat him to it. No need. But Sect Master, Mengpa. She still wanted to say something, but Xining suddenly turned to look at her. In the future you don't have to call me Sect Master anymore. Ha. Mengpa froze. When you sent us back the last time, although I can understand your position, but, as expected, you will still be angry. Xining looked at her seriously. The child that she had raised chose to stand on the other side. So, from now on, you are no longer a disciple of Invincible Sect. With that said, she did not stay any longer. She directly brought Father Nyo to the lower realm. Only a pale-faced Mengpa was left. She stood rooted to the ground as if she had lost her soul. She did not move for a long time. Perhaps she really stood for too long. The God Fiend, who was lying on the ground, could not help but tug at the corner of her clothes. Hey, are you all right? Mengpa still did not move. What's wrong? There was still no response. A moment later there was a dripping sound. A water droplet fell and hit the godfiend's hand. Why are you crying? Mengpa seemed to wake up. Her legs gave way and she sat on the ground. She wailed loudly. Wah! It's all your fault, all your fault, all your fault. I said I don't want Sect Master to go back, but you refused to listen. You even said it was for the 3 realms. It's all because of you that she's angry at me. You don't have to be so sad, do you? I didn't know that she was the manager that Kai Tian found. I don't care. Give Sect Master back to me, give her back to me. Mengpa became more and more upset as she cried. As she cried, she even hammered the person beside her. Wait, don't hit me. I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Wah? Why was he always the one getting beaten up? Chapter 300. Shen Ying's so-called reloading was actually to bring Chef's body back to its original state when he was not injured. This was one of the powers of the manager. The manager managed everything in this plane including time and space. But Chef's reloading meant that he returned to the stage of a newbie. In other words, he had to return to the lower realm to cultivate until his body was old enough to accept the temporarily sealed assistant seal. In other words, you asked Chef to reload his account? Lonman's eyes widened. Chef already had the cultivation of a divine supreme. This reloading was equivalent to tens of thousands of years of hard work going back to the beginning. He was definitely not gloating over Chef's misfortune. A 0? No. Shining shook her head. His body is still the same as before. What do you mean? Shining glanced at him and said, he's a divine being. The smile on Lonman's face froze. He cursed, holy shit. I hate people who were born at the finish line. Even reloading his account was at the finish line. Then where did you send him? Shining waved her hand and the two of them arrived at a place with green mountains and clear waters. There was a small village in front of them. There were many people working in the fields. Why do I feel that this place looks familiar? Lone Moon subconsciously sensed for a moment. In an instant, everything in this world appeared in his mind. Holy shit, isn't this the 3 Azure Realms? It was the lower realm that they had transmigrated from. But now it was one of the 3,000 realms. You reloaded Chef to this place? Shining nodded and pointed to the front. He's here. Indeed, there was a child who was not even half his waist tall walking towards them. Although he was much smaller, his face was exactly the same as when he was in the divine realm. It really was reloading. Even his figure had returned. But the terrible injuries on his body had all disappeared. Lone Moon heaved a sigh of relief. His figure flashed and he appeared beside the child. He raised his hand in greeting. Chef, why are you? Before he finished speaking, the child acted as if he did not see him. He walked past him and walked towards a small path. His little face was cold the whole time. He did not even look at Lone Moon. What the hell? Lone Moon stared blankly for a long while, even forgetting to put down his raised hand. Looking at Chef walking away, he finally understood what was going on. In a flash, he returned to Shen Ying's side. What's going on? Didn't you say that he wouldn't lose his memory? Her attitude clearly didn't seem like she knew him. I just sealed it, Shen Ying replied. After thinking for a moment, she added, legacy. Lone Moon paused, then reacted immediately. The dragon race had their own heritage. Chef's memories naturally had this heritage. Although his body was an innate sword embodiment like before, he still could not bear the heritage of the dragon race. Therefore he could only seal it for now. It would probably take a long time before he could slowly unseal it. In other words, he still did not have the slightest bit of cultivation. Why did he suddenly feel more comforted? Wait. He suddenly thought of a problem. Then, do we have to stay here and watch him grow up before we can go back? Yeah. Right my ass. What was the difference between that and reincarnation? As a manager, is it really okay for you to slack off? Yet they couldn't just leave Chef here. He was no different from a real mortal now. Who knew what would happen if they left him here? Go and stop him. Lone Moon pushed Shen Ying. You have to at least get your disciple back, right? Although he was originally a divine race, if he did not cultivate, who knew when he would receive the assistant seal? Go get your disciple back. Only then did Shen Ying slowly walk over to that side. The child who was stopped again did not walk directly from the side this time. He stopped in his tracks and looked up at the woman in front of him. His eyes were filled with confusion. You? Shen Ying squatted down and looked straight at the child in front of her. Remembering Father Nyo's instructions, she asked seriously, do you know how to cook? The child, Lone Moon, there was a moment of silence. Straight face, the next moment, he ran away. The child looked at her warily, then turned around and ran in the direction he came from. It would be weird if he didn't run. Lone Moon was so angry that his liver hurt. I asked you to take him in as a disciple. Who asked you to ask him how to cook? It was good enough that he was not treated as a lunatic. Shining was still that lazy look. She used to say the same thing. Forget it, he should be living in this village. Lone Moon took a deep breath. Let's hurry and get him back. We must let him start cultivating as soon as possible. That way he can recover his memory faster. Lone Moon was just about to pull Shining to chase after him when he suddenly heard a beep. It sounded 3 times as if some alarm had been triggered. The sound was a little familiar. This is... Lone Moon was stunned and could not react for a moment. Plane alarm? Shining spoke. She raised her hand that was being grabbed and pointed at the wristband on his hand that was lit up with a red light. Lone Moon then remembered that this wristband was one of the many things that Xinjing had forced onto Shining. She was in a bad mood then and just said, "It will be useful." She did not expect that it could also send out a plane alarm. Just as he was thinking, a shadow suddenly appeared in front of him. An anxious god fiend suddenly sent a voice transmission. "Boss, it's not good. The providence of the 3 realms has suddenly started to riot. I can't control it." "What?" Lone Moon was shocked. Godfiend was in charge of the order of this plane. The providence was also the foundation of this world's stability. A riot of providence meant that something big had happened in this plane. "Shining, do you feel anything?" "Not at the moment." Shining shook her head. "Then let's go back to Godfiend and take a look." "But Chef." She pointed not far away. "You keep an eye on Chef. I'll be right back." Lone Moon quickly instructed. With that, his figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. Shining was stunned. She slowly put down her hand and then finished the second half of her sentence. "There's something strange." Forget it. It's not important anyway." I Ching lived in a dilapidated little thatched cottage at the outermost part of the village. The house was not big. One look and you could tell that it was an abandoned house. It could barely be used for living. There was a big tree in front. Beside the tree was a half-collapsed house with some miscellaneous items. I Ching, who had shrunk into a little bean again, opened the door and saw Shining outside. He was stunned for a while. He seemed to remember that she was the person who stopped him on the road just now. His 2 little brows furrowed. The 2 of them just stared at each other for a long time. He then asked tentatively, "Are you hungry?" Shining nodded. The kind that did not eat breakfast." Chapter 301. So it was because she was hungry that she had been following him? The child looked as if he had figured out the reason. He then opened the door to the courtyard. "Come in." Shining followed his advice and walked in. She scanned the room, which was old and shabby, but still relatively clean. She turned to look at the little bean who was busy at the side. Perhaps it was because of the time difference in the divine realm. He was already a 10-year-old child in the time she took to beat up the godfiend. "Wait here for a while." He turned to enter the house and took out 2 salted fish from somewhere. "These were given to me by Granny Wang from the village. These are all I have." Shining looked at the salted fish in his hand and did not say anything. "You don't know how to cook?" Seeing that she did not take it, the child could only ask. "No." She shook her head firmly. He looked at the salted fish awkwardly and then glanced at the half-collapsed house. After a while, he seemed to have made up his mind. "Wait a moment." He walked in. Shining then realized that it was originally a kitchen. She could even see a stove. He stood on tiptoe and placed the salted fish on the stove. He ran back to the well in the yard to get a bucket of water and carried it in. He then moved an old chair over and began to brush the pot on the stove. As he brushed, he said to Shining, who had no intention of doing anything, "I've never cooked before. I don't know if I know how to." As he spoke, he brushed the pot even faster. It was as if his body was instinctive. Even the salted fish, who did not know how to cook at all, had a dozen methods in his mind. He subconsciously muttered, "It's a pity there's no rice." "I have it," Shining suddenly said. The child who was brushing the pot was startled. He turned to look at Shining, who had suddenly approached him. Before he could react, Shining reached into the pouch beside her and pulled hard. The pouch was only the size of a pouch, but in an instant she pulled out a sack that was even bigger than his body. It was filled with white rice grains, each crystal clear and plump, and he could faintly see a faint white gas coming from it. "Here." Shining placed the sack at his feet. The child jumped down from the shabby chair and curiously looked at these seemingly beautiful grains of rice. For some reason, another thought emerged in his mind. He opened his mouth and said, "Red spirit beast meat is very fragrant, but it's a pity that there's no. I do." Before he could finish his words, the person in front of him took out another piece of bright red meat from the bag. His eyes widened even more. "Red spirit beast and ordinary chicken. I do." She took out another piece of chicken. "Ah, that immortal spirit goat. I have it." He took it out. "Swamp beast. I do." He continued digging. "Fresh fragrant grass. I have it." He was still digging. "Onion and ginger. I have it." He dug around without restraint. "Oil, salt, sauce, vinegar. I have it." Wilful took it out. "Pots and pans. I have." 10 minutes later, the kitchen floor was filled with all kinds of ingredients. Even the yard outside was filled with them. The child was shocked at first, but he was completely calm towards the end. He turned and climbed back onto the shabby chair and quickly started cooking. The more he cooked, the more confused he became. He had never cooked before, but once he got the ingredients, his body knew what to do subconsciously, as if it was instinct. An hour later, fragrant dishes filled the entire table. Shining didn't need anyone to call her. She was already sitting in front of the table, and like a gale sweeping leaves, she began to eat. On the other hand, the little bean at the side had a confused look on his face, as if he had no idea what was going on. He glanced at the person eating happily beside him, but he didn't feel the slightest bit out of place, as if this was how it was supposed to be. He turned to look at the leftover ingredients on the floor, and then nudged the person next to him. "Do you want to keep it?" Shining stopped eating and directly pulled off the storage bag beside her and handed it over. The child was stunned and subconsciously took it. Only then did he understand that she wanted him to keep it. He swung his legs and slid down from the chair, and began to put the ingredients on the floor into the storage bag one by one. The more he stuffed, the more surprised he was. He had never seen such a magical bag. There were so many things in it, but it wasn't heavy at all, as if it could never be filled. He couldn't help but flip it left and right twice. After a while, he walked back and handed it back to the big sister, who suddenly appeared at his doorstep. But she didn't take it. As she ate, she raised her chin at him vaguely. "It's yours." "It was originally chef's, she just brought it over." He was shocked and his little eyes widened. "You want to give it to me?" "Yes." He was a little hesitant, and after thinking for a while, he put it back beside Shining. "I can't take it." "Ha!" Xinying's hands paused and subconsciously replied, "Then what about cooking in the future? Do you still want to cook?" He was stunned. "Don't you want to?" she asked. Only then did he put the bag back. His little shoulders slumped. He seemed to be pestered by this strange big sister. He squeezed the bag in his hand. He was still a child after all. His eyes were bright, as if curious and excited. He looked at Shining, who was eating, as if he wanted to ask something but didn't know where to start. Shining felt a little uncomfortable under his stare. She pointed to the bowl and said, "Eat first. We'll talk after eating." He looked down and shook his head. "I actually don't need to eat." "Ha!" Shining looked up. As if afraid that she would misunderstand, he immediately explained hurriedly, I mean, I've never been hungry since I was young. I don't know why either." After he said that, he seemed to remember something and added, "This is my secret. Big sister, don't tell anyone, okay?" Although he was only 10 years old, he still vaguely understood some things. For someone like him who didn't need to eat, it must be abnormal. He had never told anyone this secret before. He didn't know why he blurted it out today, as if he instinctively thought that it was okay to tell her. "Oh," Shining replied. Then, as if remembering something, she continued to eat. Shining ate very quickly, but there were too many dishes on the table. After half an hour, she had only eaten less than half of them. She kept eating, and the child kept watching from the side. He tried his best to hold back the questions in his heart, watching as she was about to put down her chopsticks. His little face lit up instantly. Just as he was about to speak, a young male voice suddenly came from outside the house. "Hey, wild boy, are you there?" A little head squeezed through the door of the courtyard. He scanned the courtyard, and a glimmer of light that didn't belong to his age flashed in his eyes. Shinying's hand paused. "Yo." Chapter 302. The child frowned and seemed a little unhappy. He jumped down from the chair and opened the door to walk out. "Dog, why are you here?" The child at the door was also an orphan who suddenly appeared in the village like him. Both of them had no memories and lived in the abandoned houses at the entrance of the village. The villagers would help them from time to time, and the two of them lived in the village for 5 or 6 years. Perhaps because of their personalities, although they had the same experiences, the two of them did not have much contact. "I told you not to call me dog, my name is Jing Qi." The child frowned and thought of something. He shook the sweet potato in his hand and said with enthusiasm, "Grandma Wang gave me a sweet potato. Let's eat it together?" "No need." He shook his head. Jing Qi did not listen to him at all. He directly stuffed the sweet potato into his hand, and the child had to catch it. "Eat," Jing Qi urged. He took a bite and looked at the child while eating. "We are in the same boat. It's normal to help each other." He chuckled and looked generous. His eyes rolled as if he thought of something. He snorted and said, "This village is full of unruly people. How dare they say it's a village protected by immortals? They live a rich life and harvest every year, but they usually ignore us. Where is the demeanor of an immortal? Isn't it because we are young and easy to bully?" The child was stunned. He glanced at the sweet potato in his hand and subconsciously frowned. He felt that there was something wrong with what he said, but he could not tell what it was. The more Jing Qi spoke, the angrier he became. As if eager to find a sense of approval, he patted the child's shoulder. "Wild boy, believe it or not, one day I will stand out. At that time, I will no longer have to rely on others and trample all these snobs under my feet." The child was stunned. After a while he nodded. He just wanted him to leave quickly. "I knew it. Only you can understand me." His expression lit up and he laughed like a little adult. "Just for the sake of your trust, I, your brother, will protect you in the future. Do you want to go out with me?" "Go out of the village?" The child immediately shook his head. "Everyone says that the outside of the village is very dangerous. We can't go out." "You believe that?" Jing Qi rolled his eyes and snorted. "Soon the danger will not be outside the village but inside the village. If you... Oh, what's that smell?" He suddenly sniffed and seemed to have thought of something. His eyes lit up and he said, "Oh right, I heard from Grandma Wang that she gave you 2 salted fish. You must not know what to do, right? Why don't I help you?" Without waiting for his reply, she pushed open the door and walked in. "Wait." He hurriedly chased after her. The other party had already seen Shening sitting inside, and the table in front of her that was filled with unfinished food. He was completely stunned, as if he had never expected to see such a scene. He stared at the table full of dishes, and there were faint sounds of swallowing. When the child hurriedly chased after him, his little face immediately scrunched up into a ball, and he looked at the person who rushed in with a disapproving expression. The child called Jing Qi tried his best to control the desire in his eyes as he looked at the food. He smiled politely at Shening and said in an innocent voice, "Big sister, are you eating?" As soon as he finished speaking, his stomach made a growling sound. Xinying's eyes narrowed and she replied, "Yes." Then, as if she did not see his longing gaze, she continued to slurp down the dishes on the table, and the sound became louder than before. There were not many dishes on the table to begin with, and now they were disappearing rapidly. Soon there was only half a plate of shredded meat left. A trace of anxiety flashed in Jing Qi's eyes, but he did not dare to ask for more. After some thought, he turned to look at the child beside him and smiled. "Wild boy, who is this beautiful big sister? Is she your lost family member?" The child looked up at Shening and then at the person who had come. Only then did he remember that he had not asked who the other party was, and did not know how to answer. But Jing Qi thought that he was acquiescing, and his smile became even brighter. "I am happy for you that you can find your family, but aren't you being too much? I didn't know that you were eating so well and I was worried that you would not be full, so I sent you sweet potatoes." As he laughed, he patted his shoulder vigorously. "We are all brothers, so I won't stand on ceremony with you." With that said, he did not wait for a response as if he could not bear it any more, and directly picked up his chopsticks to pick up the plate of shredded meat. "Wait." The child panicked, instinctively looking at Shening. Shening did not move at first, but when the other party's chopsticks were about to pick up the food, she suddenly reached out and lifted the bowl, causing the other party to pick up nothing. Then, in front of the other party, she slurped it all into her mouth, leaving not even a bit of gravy. Only then did she put down the bowl, touch her belly and say, "I'm full." The child, Jing Qi, his entire body froze as if he had not expected that the other party would be so shameless as to snatch food from a child, not even leaving any gravy. His face immediately paled and his face was full of disbelief. Instead, the child beside him thought of something and ran back to the kitchen, took out something and handed it to him. "Doggy, this is for you." Unsurprisingly, it was the 2 salted fish. Jing Qi was stunned for a moment, and a sense of humiliation that he had never felt before rose in his heart. Anger suddenly surged and he slapped the child's hand away. "What do you mean? Do you think I'm a beggar?" Not knowing if it was because of anger, his entire face turned red, and his whole body began to tremble. "Wild kid, I did not expect you to be like the people in the village, such a selfish person. Do you think I care about your dishes?" The child touched his red hand. At first he was not angry, but now he frowned and said seriously, "These are big sister's, I can't give them to you on her behalf, but the salted fish are mine." With that said, he handed the fish in his hand. "You." The other party became even angrier. He looked at Shining as if he wanted to explode in anger, but in the end he was afraid, and could only turn to glare at the child beside him. "To think that I thought you were different from the others and wanted to help you, I did not expect. You will pay for your stupidity." He seemed to have thought of something and with a cold snort, he turned and stormed out. He looked as if the other party had really let down his great kindness. On the other hand, the child looked confused, completely not knowing what was going on. He was not wrong. Those dishes were all brought by Big Sister, he was only responsible for cooking. Of course, Doggy had to ask Big Sister if he wanted to eat. Just as he was thinking, a big hand landed on his head. That Big Sister who could conjure many ingredients suddenly reached out and touched his head, looking straight into his eyes. He only felt a warmth in his heart, and a sense of joy rose in him for no reason. Was Big Sister comforting him? He subconsciously moved closer, wanting to let this trace of warmth linger a little longer. But he saw that she suddenly bent down and gave him a beautiful smile that made his heart tremble. In the next moment, a sweet voice sounded in his ear. "It's time to wash the dishes." Chapter 303. By the time the child was done, the sky had already darkened. Every house had their lights on. His house had no lights, so they could only rely on the moonlight to see. The child pushed open the door, only to find that Big Sister was sprawled on the table, looking drowsy. He climbed onto the chair and pushed her hand before asking curiously, "Big Sister, it's already dark, aren't you going home?" Shining tilted her head lazily and looked at him, nodding. "I am." "Then, I'm waiting for my parents." The child faltered as if he did not understand her words and was about to ask. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew from the door, and he subconsciously closed his eyes. In the next moment, a deep voice suddenly sounded. "I'm back, Shining, have you settled it?" He looked up, only to find that there was suddenly one more person in the house, dressed in white with black hair, surrounded by a faint layer of white qi, holding a jade flute in his hand. He did not look like a real person and for some reason he felt a little familiar. He took a step back, a little wary. But Big Sister, who was still sprawled on the table, suddenly tilted her head. "Father Nyo, what took you so long? She did not even make it for dinner. I went to an immortal sect on the way to register." Lone Moon directly sat on the chair at the side, looking up at the cold face of the child opposite him. "We can't always stay in this small mountain village, the spirit chi here is too thin, not suitable for cultivation. I found a suitable sect and will set off tomorrow morning." "Oh," Shining responded. "I haven't found out what happened to Godfiend." He frowned. "For the time being, I don't know what happened to the plane, but the providence suddenly began to tilt, and he can't adjust it no matter what he does, and is about to jump up in anxiety. I can only find out that the direction of the tilt is in the nearby lower realms." "Oh. The matter of providence is the most troublesome and can't be forcefully taken back, it has to be used slowly." "Oh. What? Oh, you're the manager after all, can't you be more careful?" Lone Moon rolled his eyes at her. "At least find out who exactly it tilted to?" "I know." "What?" He stood up abruptly. "You know?" "Yes, I saw it earlier." She nodded and added, 2 hours ago." "Holy shit, that person is in the 3 Azure Worlds? Where is he?" "Let's go." She must be a fake manager. Lone Moon took a deep breath and resisted the urge to tear her apart. "Where did you go? Which direction?" "What? We're north and south." Damn it, he couldn't expect her to know the way. In other words, that person had once stayed in this village. Lone Moon frowned and turned to look outside the door. "It's no wonder that when we came to this village in the day, it was peaceful. But now the demonic aura is so strong. Looks like tonight won't be peaceful." As soon as he finished speaking, there was a loud bang not far away, as if something had been broken. There seemed to be a flash of white light in the sky. In the next moment, a series of roars could be heard. It sounded like the roar of a tiger and the cry of a fox. All sorts of sounds were mixed together. The originally quiet village suddenly became lively. All sorts of cries and screams could be heard. There was no lack of screams and screams of demons. Obviously, something had appeared. Big sister. The child standing at the side was shocked. He moved towards Xining with some fear. You can actually be afraid? Lonman's eyes flashed with surprise. He looked gloating. It's really not easy to live long. You look much cuter than that fake child in the divine world. The child was stunned. Although he did not understand what Lone Moon was saying, he seemed to be angered by his teasing tone. He took a deep breath and walked out. He sat back on the chair with a serious expression. His little hands were clenched tightly and he sat up straight. What an uncute child. Aren't you going to help? Xining looked outside and gestured. There's a protective array in this village. What we broke was only the outer layer. Lone Moon had no intention of moving at all. Although the array inside is not very powerful, it should be able to protect tens of villagers for a night. As long as they don't come out and court their own deaths. What's more, there's an immortal sect nearby. With so many demons barging in, they will naturally sense it. At most, they will send people here at dawn. Xining did not reply. She only glanced at him. And Godfiend also said that. Lone Moon continued with a serious expression. The fate of mortals is predetermined. We'd better not interfere easily. Oh. Xinying's eyes narrowed. She suddenly said, You listen to him? Lone Moon's whole body stiffened. As if recalling something, he cursed under his breath. Shit. Damn it. He almost got tricked by that bastard Godfiend again. He stood up directly and instructed the child opposite him, Look after her. The next moment, his figure flashed and he directly rushed out. The child was stunned. For a moment he did not understand what Lone Moon meant. But he still turned his head and looked closely at the person beside him. In a short while, the terrifying roars outside became much softer. There were even some faint cheers. Xining continued to play dead on the table. The child's expression also became much better. Until on the right side there was a loud rumble. It sounded like something was collapsing. It was accompanied by a tiger's roar. His face instantly turned pale. He stood up abruptly and exclaimed, Granny Wang. With that said, he directly turned and rushed out. Before Xining could finish speaking, the other party had already disappeared. She could only sigh. So troublesome. Why is he not sleeping in the middle of the night? Only then did she stand up lazily with her hands on the table. The child did not run far. He only went to another house tens of meters away. Xining only circled around twice before she finally found the person. But he had already been caught by a tiger demon. That was a 5th-level tiger demon. It had not even completely transformed into a human. But its human body had a huge tiger head. Its mouth was slightly open, revealing a mouth full of sharp teeth. There was a person under its feet. It looked like an old man. Its 2 hands were grabbing onto 2 children. One was Yi Qing, who was kicking and hitting with all his might. The other was a little girl about 5 or 6 years old. She was sobbing. Let go of me. She struggled with all her might. But her tiny arms did not pose any threat to the tiger demon at all. Ah! Such fresh and tender human flesh. I love it the most. The tiger demon's eyes lit up. He looked like he was about to drool. Originally, this old woman's flesh was too old to taste good. The little one was not even enough to fill my teeth. I did not expect that another little one would come to my door. Finally, I can have a full meal. Let go of Granny Wang and Nyonyo. The child used all his strength, but it was still to no avail. Instead, his face was being pinched by the tiger demon until it turned purple. Since you're in such a hurry, then I'll start eating from you. The tiger demon directly lifted the child and opened its bloody mouth. It looked like it was about to bite him. Xining, who had finally come around, suddenly said, It's not good to bully children, right? Chapter 304. The tiger demon paused and turned back abruptly. His eyes lit up as if he had seen something delicious. His saliva dripped down. Women. Haha, what luck do I have today? All of them are coming to me. I like to eat the flesh of young women the most. With that said, he threw the 2 children in his hands and walked towards Xining. The boy coughed heavily. Before he could catch his breath, he hurriedly shouted back at Xining, Big sister, run. It's a demon, run. Shining did not move. She watched as the tiger demon reached out to grab her. The child panicked. He pounced forward and hugged the tiger demon's leg tightly. The tiger demon slowed down. Looking at the person on his leg, he frowned. You're courting death. Light flashed in his hand and turned into sharp claws. He was about to scratch the child's back. I say. Shining suddenly stepped forward. You come out to eat people. Doesn't the demon monarch care? The tiger demon paused. He turned to look at her and sneered. Demon monarch? Ah. Our demon monarch will only let us eat a few more mortals to increase our cultivation. Oh. Shining paused. Isn't the demon monarch a rabbit? What rabbit? The tiger demon chuckled. Little girl, be good and let me eat you. I'll let you die a quick death. With that said, he reached out to grab her heart. Big sister. The child exclaimed. Oh, then I'm relieved. Shining murmured. Just as the sharp claws were about to pierce through her chest, she suddenly turned sideways and raised her hand to the back of the tiger demon's head. She pressed hard. The next moment there was a loud bang. The tiger demon, who was still arrogant just now, was pressed into the ground by her hand. It sank directly and instantly lost its breath. Even the ground cracked, and a crack that was as wide as a human appeared, extending into the village. The child was dumbfounded. He looked up at Shining blankly. He could not react for a long time. Big sister? So powerful. Do you want to learn? Shining tilted her head. He was stunned for a moment. Then his eyes lit up and shot out rays of light. His little head nodded hard. Yes. All right. Shining clapped her hands and stood up. My name is Shining. From now on I'm your master. The child was stunned. The next moment, his eyes lit up, and a sense of fulfillment that he had never felt before welled up in his heart. A while later, clenching his fists, he got up and patted the dust off his body. Kneeling down in front of her, he kowtowed 3 times before cupping his fists. Disciple greets master. Since you're my disciple again then? Shining nodded in satisfaction. She pointed to the tiger demon on the ground, who had already transformed back into its original form. Then do you know how to stir-fry tiger meat? The child, Lone Moon, who had just rushed over. Lone Moon did not spend too much time dealing with those demons. Although there were many demons this time, they were all 5th or 6th level demons. To him they were like vegetables sent to him. The sky was already bright, and the nearby immortal sects would soon send people over. He was also too lazy to explain to them. Other than being a little frightened, the villagers were fine. The only one who was slightly injured was Grandmother Wang, who lived on the outskirts of the village. That's right, the one who sent salted fish to Chef. That was an old man in his 60s, alone with a 5 or 6-year-old granddaughter. Perhaps because he lived nearby, he would occasionally help Chef, who had completely lost his memory. That was why he rushed out so anxiously earlier. The old man's injuries were not serious. Lone Moon conjured a seal to heal her, left a longevity pill, and left with Shining and Chef. Before he left, he set up a new defensive array in the village. It was obviously more effective than the previous one. Unless a demon immortal came down, no demons could rush in and eat people. Why did you set up the array at Grandmother Wang's house? Shining could not help but ask. You still dare to ask? Lone Moon turned back and glared at her. If you hadn't smashed such a big crack, I wouldn't have needed to set up the array there. He got angry at the thought of this. He had been collecting demons well when a crack suddenly appeared behind him, directly splitting the village into 2. He almost fell in. If it wasn't because of this, would they need to run away so early in the morning? Oh. She didn't use much strength. Oh, your sister. Lone Moon was full of anger. Next time can you hold back a little, do you know? He was halfway through his lecture when the child who had been standing obediently at the side suddenly stood in front of him. He opened his little hands in front of Shining and looked at him with a little anger. I don't allow you to say that about Master. She only did it to save me. Lone Moon was stunned. He then looked at the little bean in front of him and rolled his eyes. Che, how can you still be a master after losing your memory? He ignored him and looked up at Shining. You took him in as a disciple? Yes. Shining nodded and touched the little bean's head. Come, call Father Nyo. Get lost. Lone Moon glared at her and looked at the confused child. It's good that you recognize him. All right, little brat, what's your name now? The child shook his head. I don't have a name. From the time he could remember, he had been in that rundown house in that small village. There was no one around him, so no one gave him a name. Just nice. Lone Moon heaved a sigh of relief. He was really afraid that it would be awkward if he changed his name. He pushed Shining. You're his master. Tell him what's his name. The child's eyes lit up and he looked at Shining. Master, do you want to give me a name? Huh. Shining was stunned. She looked down at the person in front of her and sighed. Oh, you'll be called I Ching. Before she could finish, Lone Moon cut her off. He grabbed the child and said word by word, Your Dao name is I Ching. Do you understand? Chef my ass. It was fine if he called him Chef, but did he have to change his name? Shining. Wasn't this called getting used to it? I Ching. Instead, the child at the side said these two words happily. For some reason, a familiar feeling surged in his heart. He turned to Shining and said happily, Thank you, Master. Lone Moon. Son of AB***. He was the one who said it. Father Nyo, where exactly are we going now? Shining looked at the clouds that kept flying past them. They had been flying for more than 10 minutes. I'm so hungry. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Hungry your ass. Didn't you just freaking finish your dinner? He turned back and glared at her. He looked ahead and replied, We're going to the Honesty Sect in the Upper Azure world. What? What place is that? Chapter 305. That's a mid-level immortal cultivation sect in the Upper Azure world, Lone Moon explained casually. When I just came back I already inquired about it. Honesty Sect is mostly sword cultivators, and he wants to start cultivating as soon as possible. That place is suitable for Chef I Ching. So I've already gone over there to join Honesty Sect in our names. That meant he went out to find a meal ticket. Father Nyo was indeed a responsible person. Before I Ching's cultivation is successful, we will stay there. Lone Moon looked down at Chef. The invasion of the demons into the mountain village had given him a reminder. It was too dangerous for him to fight back like this. He didn't know when his body could recover to accept the assistant seal, but it was obvious that the higher his cultivation, the more advantageous it was for him. So before he became a real assistant, he had to improve his cultivation as soon as possible. Thinking about it, the fan under his feet flew even faster, and stopped after flying for another 10 minutes or so. We're here. He pointed to a floating peak in front of him that was rich in spirit chi, and conjured a seal for himself. Instantly, the faint white chi around him disappeared, and he directly suppressed his cultivation to the soul formation stage. He turned to look at Shining beside him, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Forget about you. Anyway, even if she pretended to be a soul formation cultivator, no one would be able to tell. Shining was confused. He had already flown in with the others. Lu Hong felt that he might have been very lucky recently. As the sect master of Honesty Sect, he had been racking his brains for hundreds of years, trying to make the sect flourish. He had thought of all ways. But because their sect had always been mainly sword cultivators. Sword cultivators' cultivation had always been harder than other cultivators, so there were very few disciples in the sect who were successful in cultivation. Even those who reached nascent soul were less than 5. Sword cultivators' hearts were relatively simple, and the sect had always been harmonious and never had any internal strife. The disciples were also quite hardworking in cultivation. But they were in the Upper Azure world after all. Compared to other sects they were not enough. Although sword cultivators could challenge those of a higher level, they couldn't compete with others in numbers. Besides, other sects all had soul formation cultivators. Not to mention the top sects, even ordinary sects with similar strength would more or less have 1 or 2 soul formation cultivators. Honesty Sect alone had a shallow foundation to begin with. Apart from the founding master who ascended to immortality, no other soul formation cultivator appeared. Especially after an elder failed to break through to the soul formation stage and died, Honesty Sect's days became more and more difficult. He could even imagine that after the next sect competition, Honesty Sect would be demoted from a mid-tier sect to a lower-tier sect. When he thought of this, his heart burned with anxiety, and even his cultivation seemed to have been obstructed and was unable to advance in the slightest. He didn't know if it was the blessing of the ancestral master, but just as he was about to accept his fate, he was hit by a huge pie. Suddenly, a soul formation sword cultivator called Lone Moon came to the sect and asked to join Honesty Sect. He once thought that he was dreaming. That was a soul formation cultivator that Honesty Sect couldn't get for hundreds of years, and now it was delivered to their doorstep so easily? Furthermore, the other party was a sword cultivator. What was the concept of a soul formation sword cultivator? They were invincible among their peers and could even fight against those of a higher level. In other words, they were invincible in the entire three Azure realms. Such a powerful cultivator actually wanted to join their sect, which was on the verge of falling into decline. Lu Hong felt that this must be a dream. Absolutely. But when he asked again, the other party didn't have any intention of going back on his words. He even left a trace of his divine perception in the nameplate of the sect and gave it to him. Only then did Lu Hong confirm that the other party wasn't joking. He was instantly overjoyed. Filled with excitement, he carefully asked if there were any other requirements for the sect. All he could think of was to keep this soul formation cultivator at all costs. But he only thought for a while and said that he might bring a friend to join them tomorrow. That's it? What is the cultivation of supremacy's friend? He asked subconsciously. The other party's face seemed to twitch and he answered after a while, you can take it as soul formation. After saying that, he indicated that he was going to pick someone up first, and left Honesty's sect. Soul formation. Another soul formation cultivator. Lu Hong couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't expect that in the blink of an eye, his sect, which was about to become a low-tier sect, would suddenly welcome two soul formation cultivators, and they even came on their own, allowing them to be picked up for free. He was so excited that he couldn't even calm down while meditating. He summoned the elders overnight to inform them of this huge matter. The reaction of the whole sect was the same as his. They were so excited that they wanted to go to other sects and shout. They called all the disciples overnight and gathered them in front of the main hall, waiting for the other party's return with shining eyes. They expressed their welcome to the to the soul formation cultivator with their actions. Who knew that this wait would last for an entire night? Their excitement didn't diminish, and it wasn't until the sun was high up in the sky that they saw the return of the two the soul formation cultivators. So, when Lone Moon brought Shining over, what they saw was Lu Hong and the thousands of disciples behind him in front of the main hall, staring at them with hungry eyes. As someone who had been in two planes, even Lone Moon got a shock. What was going on? Lu Hong leads the disciples of Honesty sect to welcome the return of supremacy. Lu Hong took a step forward and bowed respectfully with cupped fists. Immediately, a large group of disciples bowed together. Welcome, supremacy. Their voices were loud and clear, and their aura was vigorous. The three people who landed on the ground were dumbfounded. Shining couldn't help but poke Father Nyo with her elbow. You hired extras? Pui. Lone Moon rolled his eyes at her. I just made an appointment. I don't know why this happened. This was a little too enthusiastic. His face darkened, and he had to step forward to support the person in front. Sect Master Lu, you don't have to be so polite. I do. Lu Hong smiled even brighter, the corners of his mouth almost reaching the back of his ears. He was really happy to see who dared to say that their Honesty sect couldn't cultivate soul formation cultivators. They didn't need to do anything, they just needed to pick them up. It is the fortune of Honesty sect that supremacy can join us. So this time, I would like to let my disciple admire supremacy's elegance. As he spoke, he stepped aside and invited him in. Supremacy, please. The three followed into the hall, and the thousands of disciples outside dispersed. But from time to time they could feel several curious eyes looking at them, intentionally or unintentionally. Only Lu Hong and another nascent soul cultivator were left in the hall. Lone Moon first did a routine business exchange with the sect master. After a while he looked at the two and said, "Oh yes, we just came here and are not familiar with our sect. Is the soul formation cultivator in the sect here?" They were going to stay here for a long time after all, and it was necessary to bow to them. Chapter 306. Lu Hong stiffened, and a trace of surprise flashed across his face. Could it be that he didn't know that there were no soul formation cultivators in Honesty sect? He immediately became nervous, afraid that the other party would go back on his words. He exchanged a look with the junior brother beside him before speaking carefully. I'm sorry to say that before supremacy came, our sect did not have any soul formation cultivators. Lone Moon didn't expect that this sect would be so weak, but thinking that it was a mid-tier immortal sect, he didn't mind. What about the nascent soul cultivators? There are three? Three? So few. Was it so hard to survive in the Upper Azure world now? Yes, one is me, the other is my junior brother Lu Rui. Oh, what about the other one? Wasn't there supposed to be three? The other one unfortunately failed to break through to the soul formation stage a month ago and passed away. Lone Moon, Shining, Yi Xiao, wasn't there only two of them? No wonder they were so enthusiastic and even lined up the whole sect to welcome them. There were only two nascent soul cultivators in the whole sect. How dare they call themselves a mid-tier immortal sect? Even the ordinary immortal sects in the Middle Azure world weren't so shabby. Forget it. Lone Moon sighed. Anyway, they were only staying in the lower realm for chef. We're a little tired from the journey. Sect Master, please arrange a place for us to rest. Of course. Seeing that they didn't leave directly, the sect master heaved a sigh of relief and immediately led them out of the hall. Supremacy and... He looked at Shining, who had already eaten half a plate of fruit, and then remembered that this should be the friend that Supremacy Lone Moon mentioned. He actually forgot to ask. Her name is Shining. Lone Moon introduced. The child beside her is her disciple I Ching. Lu Hong subconsciously looked at her cultivation, but didn't see any fluctuations of spirit power around her. His heart sank. She was indeed a soul formation cultivator, she could hide her aura so well. He hurriedly bowed respectfully. Supremacy Shen. Then he looked at Chef beside him. Little friend I Ching. With that said, he led the three out of the main hall and went to the back. After passing through a few teleportation arrays, it didn't take long for them to arrive at a floating peak. All he could see was a field of pink. This was a peach forest and the flowers were in full bloom. It looked very beautiful, and he could faintly see some low-level spirit herbs everywhere. There was a small building in the forest that was extremely elegant. This? Lone Moon was a little confused. The scenery was good, but wasn't the spirit chi here too thin? Normally, immortal mountains and blessed lands would not easily grow mortal plants. This peach blossom forest was obviously not specially planted. Instead, it grew on its own due to the sparse spiritual energy. To put it lightly, being able to reach core formation in a place like this was already a sign of fate. This is the place with the most abundant spirit chi in our sect. Lu Hong, on the other hand, had an excited expression on his face as he introduced the place. He couldn't help but reveal a bit of envy in his eyes. So this is the place where the founder of our sect cultivated. It is rumored that it is the place where the spirit vein passes through. Spirit vein? You must be joking. Are you sure there is a spirit vein here? Lu Hong stiffened for a moment and said with some embarrassment, ever since the ancestral master ascended, the spirit chi here is indeed different from before. But, as compared to the other peaks, it is indeed much thicker. Lone Moon turned to look at the other spirit peaks. He didn't notice it earlier, but now that he took a closer look, the spirit chi was indeed getting thinner and thinner. Suddenly he had the urge to turn and leave. I Ching wanted to cultivate this kind of spirit chi was definitely not enough. Instead, Shining turned to poke Lu Hong and asked, Sect Master, do you provide meals? Lu Hong faltered for a moment, thinking that she was afraid that the disciples around her would be hungry without grain liberation. He immediately nodded and said, Yes. Our sect doesn't have much else, but we have especially many low-level disciples. That's why there are several canteens in the sect. Alright, we'll stay. Xin Ying's eyes brightened. That's enough from you. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Don't stop walking the moment you hear about food. And that sect Master Lu, he has so many low-level disciples and none of them have grain liberation. What's there to be proud of? Lone Moon felt a little mentally tired. He took a deep breath and said, Forget it, if you want to stay then stay. Sect Master Lu, please bring some high-level Dharma artifacts over. I'll borrow them and set up a spirit gathering array. After a long time, perhaps the spirit meridians below will be able to recover. Recover the spirit meridians? That was something that would benefit the entire sect. Lu Hong's eyes brightened and he immediately took out his storage bag. Alright, all the Dharma treasures of our sect are here. What level of Dharma artifact does Supremacy want? The higher the better. Lu Hong thought for a moment and immediately took out a spirit sword from his bag. He handed it over with a face full of excitement. This is the highest level Dharma artifact of our sect, the Dharma treasure of our sect, Demon Slaying Sword. Supremacy, please see if you can use it. Lone Moon looked at the demon slaying sword that he carefully held up. The corner of his mouth twitched violently. Are you kidding? Your sect's Dharma treasure is a 6th-level spirit sword. And it's freaking cracked. Nothing else? Is it not enough? Lu Hong thought for a moment and then took out a 5th-level broken fan, a 4th-level zither, a 3rd-level broken bell. He handed it over with a sincere expression. Lonman's face was already as black as the bottom of a pot. What kind of poor and destitute sect had he randomly entered? Yet the other party had a sincere expression on his face. With a casual sweep of his divine perception, he knew that the pile of junk in his hands was indeed the best thing in the entire sect. Instantly, he felt that the entire sect seemed to be exuding a sense of poverty. Lone Moon sucked in a deep breath and suppressed the urge to crush those broken things. Forget it. He turned and conjured a seal. He opened the small mystic realm that he usually carried around with him. He directly grabbed a white ribbon that kept twisting like a living thing from inside. Instantly, the surrounding spirit chi increased tremendously. It was astonishingly rich, as if it was about to materialize. Without any guidance, it surged into his body. Lu Hong's spirit was instantly lifted. Even his cultivation that had not moved for a long time was slightly loosened. He could not help but stare at the white object in Loneman's hand with wide eyes. Could this be a spirit meridian? He exclaimed. It's an immortal. Lone Moon stopped halfway and sighed. Forget it. Just take it as a spirit meridian. He still had half of the immortal meridian that the little bird had given him. He directly took 2 steps forward, conjured a seal, and planted the half of the immortal meridian in his hand. In an instant, something spread out from the entire floating peak. The originally thin spiritual chi instantly surged and filled every corner of the sect. The ground also shook. With the help of spirit chi, Honesty Sect, which was originally floating more than 10 meters in the air, began to rise straight up. In a moment, it was already floating above the clouds. The richer the spirit chi in the blessed land, the higher it would float. This was common knowledge in the 3 azure realms. But no one had ever seen it go straight up into the sky. Lu Hong was so shocked that he dropped the Dharma artifact in his hand. He opened his mouth wide in disbelief. Come with me for a while. Lone Moon tugged at the dumbfounded Lu Hong. Supremacy, where are we going? Lu Hong was still confused. To check the accounts. I just can't stand the sight of you being so poor. Lu Hong, Shening, I Ching, Fruit Daddy was still the same daddy? Chapter 307. Shening and the others stayed at Honesty Sect. Because of the immortal meridian, Honesty Sect, which was supposed to be a low-class sect, became the sect with the densest spirit chi in the upper azure world. Immortal chi was denser spirit chi. Although it was only a small section of the broken meridian, it was hundreds of times stronger than ordinary spirit meridians. And the peach blossoms all over the mountain, because the ordinary plants could not withstand the dense spirit chi, withered visibly, and the spirit plants all over the ground began to grow wildly. Perhaps it was a coincidence that the floating peak they lived on was called Flutterless Peak. For convenience, Lone Moon changed it to Invincible Peak. Perhaps because he mistakenly entered a poor sect, Lone Moon felt that it hurt his dignity as a CEO. After that day he dragged Lu Hong to check the accounts and did not return for a few days. The entire Honesty Sect suddenly became busy, and one could often see low-level disciples rushing by. The quietest ones were the master and disciple on Invincible Peak. Shining lived a good life of eating and sleeping every day, completely letting herself go. Until Father Nyo finally remembered the purpose of coming down to the lower realm and returned. I went around to find out more these few days. Lone Moon said with a heavy expression, the spirit chi in the azure world is much thinner than before. No wonder Honesty Sect still had thousands of disciples despite having so little spirit energy. According to the last time we ascended, it has already been millions of years. The 4 great clans of the past no longer exist. He sighed, feeling as if the world had changed and things remained the same, but the people had changed. Oh. Shining responded. She was not as emotional as he was. She already knew it when she first saw Long Worm. I think the decrease in spirit chi should be related to Azure World becoming an independent world. Lone Moon guessed that this was an immortal mystic realm in the past, and a world nurtured by immortal meridians. Naturally, there was plenty of spirit chi and so many soul formation and itinerant immortals. But since Azure World became one of the 3,000 worlds, all the spirit chi was nurtured by heaven and earth, so it was natural that it would be thin. There were gains and losses. It seemed like it would be more than 100 times harder for people in Azure World to ascend and become immortals. Oh. Shining continued to eat her pastry. The other half of the immortal meridian that I planted will slowly be assimilated by the azure world. It won't last long, Lone Moon said seriously. That's why we have to get Chef to cultivate as soon as possible. Why is he still immortal? Before he could finish, he glanced at I Ching, who was holding a plate at the side, and exploded. Shining paused. Your sister. Lone Moon snatched the cake from her hands. Didn't I give you the basic cultivation jade slip for you to teach him? What have you been doing these past few days? At least teach him how to draw chi into his body. It's been almost half a month. How come he hasn't even cultivated chi? So troublesome. Troublesome my ass. You're just lazy. Father Nyo. Shining suddenly said seriously, are you sure you want me to teach you? Dang. He stopped mid-sentence. A row of images of adamantine Barbie flashed through his mind, and the corner of his mouth twitched. I teach. Gnashing teeth. JPG damn it, if I Ching really became a body cultivator he would disband Invincible Sect when he got back. Chef, sit down cross-legged. He turned to look at I Ching. I Ching paused and subconsciously turned to look at Shining. Seeing that she had no intention of objecting, he put down the cake in his hand and turned to sit down. Very good, the achievement of pushing the blame to others is complete. Greater than over equal to. After you sense the spirit chi, just follow this method. Lone Moon pointed a finger at his forehead. A trace of spirit chi flowed through his meridians. Just as he was about to withdraw it, a large amount of spirit chi surged into I Ching's body, squeezing out the spirit chi that he did not have time to withdraw. His cultivation level also rose in a straight line. Chi refinement level 1, chi refinement level 2, until it stopped at chi refinement level 3. Holy shit. Lone Moon was shocked. Chi refinement had always been fast, but this was way too fast. Ordinary people would need at least 1 or 2 years to reach chi refinement level 3. How long did he take? Not more than 10 seconds. What's going on? He looked up at the person beside him. He's Chef, Shining replied matter-of-factly. Isn't that obvious? Of course He paused and widened his eyes. You're not going to say that apart from his body, his cultivation level did not drop as well, are you? Chef was a dragon. His initial cultivation level was Divine Realm. His body was special now. It could not withstand too much cultivation. He looked like a mortal before because he did not have spirit chi. In other words, as long as he had enough spirit chi he would not need to cultivate at all. That's right. Son of AB***. This bunch of damn cheats. I Ching looked at his little hand curiously. His eyes brightened. He was a child after all. He turned his head and looked at Shining who was behind him. His face was filled with, I've learned it, please praise me, please reward me. Shining paused. She picked up a cake from the table and handed it over. Here. Reward. I Ching's expression brightened. He immediately stood up and took the cake. So the master and disciple happily ate the cake together. Lone Moon. F*** King retard. Just as he was about to say something, a person flew over hurriedly from afar. Greetings, Supremacy. The person bowed in Lone Moon's direction. What's the matter? Lone Moon recognized him as the disciple beside Lu Hong. Supremacy, Sect Master has an urgent matter. He wants to invite Supremacy to the main hall. Lone Moon frowned. Ever since he checked the accounts, Lu Hong ran away faster than a rabbit every time he saw him. Why did he take the initiative to invite him this time? Got it? I'll go over right away. He lowered his head and glanced at I Ching beside him. The corner of his mouth twitched, but he could not help but add, you should stabilize your cultivation first. You created your own sword technique. I can't teach you. You can only rely on yourself to slowly understand it. Yes. I Ching nodded his little head, his face still cold and indifferent. Lone Moon then followed the disciple and flew towards the main peak. When the figure disappeared, I Ching's demeanor changed instantly. He was no longer cold like before. He was still a child after all. No matter how calm he was, he could not suppress the excitement of his first cultivation. He pulled Shining aside and asked her about it. Master, was that cultivation just now? I see a lot of colorful lights around me. Master, was that spirit chi? I have those lights in my body now. Master, after I have that spirit chi in my body, will I be as powerful as Master? Master, what is the sword technique that Supremacy wanted me to figure out? How do I figure it out? Master, is it? He asked faster and faster. It was as if he did not need to answer. He just poured out all the questions in his heart. Shining, this time Chef seemed a little talkative. Chapter 308. She glanced at the person in front of her, whose eyes were bright with excitement and who kept asking questions. Shining wanted to answer a few times, but she couldn't get a word in. Her ears were filled with his rapid-fire voice. After asking dozens of questions, he finally seemed to be tired. His voice became slower and slower, and his eyelids drooped down, looking like he was about to fall asleep. He was a child to begin with. He had cooked 2 meals in the morning and had just learned how to draw qi into his body. It was normal to be tired. Master, I often don't understand what you're talking about. Did I forget something? Master, I can cook a lot of delicious food? So, you'll always be with me, right? Master, I Ching likes you more than Grandma Wang. With that said, he seemed to be unable to hold on any longer. His little body swayed and fell forward, looking like he was about to hit the ground. Shining casually scooped him up and carried him back, her eyes darkening. With a sigh, he turned around and walked into the house. Hopefully he wouldn't sleep for too long. After all, he still had dinner. Speaking of which, who was Grandma Wang? Fortunately, Chef only slept for 2 hours before waking up. I Ching rubbed his eyes and got up. He was stunned when he saw Shining guarding by the bed. His little eyes brightened instantly. He didn't know why, but he felt warm in his heart. When he was in the small mountain village, he was always alone. That was why he was especially envious of the other children in the village. They had parents beside them when they slept. Even Nyonyo had Grandma Wang. Only he didn't. Every day he slept alone and woke alone. Although he was already used to it, he always felt that somewhere was empty. But now he seemed to have one too. He had a master. Master. He turned and hugged the person beside him. His whole little head was buried in her. Shining didn't pay attention and was almost knocked down by him. She hurriedly moved one leg to the side to stabilize herself. Coincidentally, she kicked the bamboo basket at the side. With a crash, fruit cores fell all over the ground. I Ching was still in her arms. He looked at the fruit cores on the ground, then looked at Shining. Suddenly he understood something. His little brows furrowed in disapproval. Shining subconsciously looked at the sky, pretending that she didn't see anything. Master, didn't you say that these fruits are not ripe yet and can't be eaten for the time being? This is actually what Father Nyo ate. Yes, definitely. Must. Alright, I was waiting for you to wake up. I was bored after sitting for too long, so I ate a few. You finished eating. Chef had indeed changed. He never talked about her in the past. He must have been led astray by Father Nyo. Master. I Ching sighed and sat up straight like a little adult. His face was serious and he was about to say something. Suddenly, a childish voice came from the door. He said carefully, Disciple Lu Tao requests to see Supremacy Shen. Uncle Master I Ching? Lu Tao? Oh. Shining paused. Seeing that there was no response from the outside, he probed, Supremacy Little Uncle Master, are you there? Here. I Ching answered and immediately jumped down from the bed. He brushed off the wrinkled corner of his clothes and glanced at Shining. Come in. Only then did the creaking sound of the door being pushed open. Unexpectedly, a child about the same age as I Ching came in. He had a round face and small eyes filled with curiosity. He looked surprisingly round. Alright, very round. This was a little fatty. Even the blue and white disciple robe he was wearing looked like a Taobao buyer's show. He first looked at I Ching, then looked at Shining, who was behind him. Perhaps it was because of his obesity that he bowed slowly. Greetings, Supremacy Little Uncle Master. What's the matter? Shining asked. Replying to Supremacy, my father? No, the sect master. He seemed to have said it out of habit. After thinking for a while, he changed the way he addressed Shining. The sect master asked me to bring Little Uncle Master to the disciple hall to record your disciple nameplate. I Ching was stunned. Then he remembered that Lone Moon seemed to have mentioned this before. He nodded. Alright. And? Lu Tao looked at Shining and continued. Supremacy Lone Moon asked me to invite Supremacy Shen to the main hall. Shining leaned lazily against the headboard. Why did Father Nyo call her again? So troublesome. Supremacy Little Uncle Master, please follow me. Lu Tao hurriedly took a step to the side and made an inviting gesture. Master, let's go. Seeing that Shining had no intention of moving, I Ching could only turn around and grab her hand. Shining then stood up and followed the little fatty to the transportation array in front of the house. Lu Tao wanted to bring Yi Qing to register his nameplate first, but Yi Qing refused. He sent Shening all the way to the main hall and watched her enter before turning in the direction of the disciple hall. Lu Tao looked confused. They could have arrived once they got out of the transportation array. Why did they have to go through the extra steps? But thinking back to his father's words, he suddenly seemed to understand something. Little Uncle Master, you are so good to Master. No wonder he became the disciple of supremacy. Yi Qing stopped in his tracks. He instantly remembered the dark history of a certain someone getting lost 5 or 6 times a day on a peak that was only a few hundred meters above sea level. He remained silent. But the little fatty was a little excited. He was the son of the sect master. Among the entire younger generation of disciples in Honesty sect, he was the youngest and the highest in seniority. Behind him was a row of junior brothers and sisters and even apprentice nephews. So everyone had to add the word little in front of his address. Lu Tao, who was in the rebellious phase, was naturally very unhappy. He didn't expect an Uncle Master, the disciple of a soul formation supremacy, who was even higher in seniority than him. He immediately felt better. So before the other party registered his nameplate, he called him Little Uncle Master first, with a very warm attitude. As if he had known beforehand that Yi Qing did not like to talk, he led him through several teleportation arrays while gesticulating and chattering, introducing all kinds of things to Yi Qing. He told him almost everything, from a few good-looking new disciples in the outer sect to which female cultivator the sect elders were interested in. It was like a moving little encyclopedia. Yi Qing also listened along the way without any intention of stopping him. But in his heart he was thinking, what should he cook for Master tonight? The two of them talked while the other was absent-minded. They were rather harmonious along the way. Seeing that they were about to reach the disciples' hall, there was a commotion in front. Lu Tao stopped in his tracks. Only then did he see a circle of people in front of the disciples' hall. They were all children less than 10 years old. Some wore blue and white disciple robes like him, while the other group wore green robes. They were divided into 2 sides and seemed to be arguing about something. Aren't they from Green Robe's sect? Lu Tao was stunned for a moment. He frowned and looked at Yi Qing. He explained casually, I heard from my father that their sect was exterminated by the demon clan. My father and Uncle Master saved some disciples with great difficulty. Why are they gathered here? Little Uncle Master, let's go and take a look? Yes. Chapter 309. Yi Qing nodded and walked over quickly. Before they got close, a small figure suddenly flew out of the crowd and fell in front of them with a thud. Lu Tao was stunned and his eyes widened. Little junior brother. He obviously knew him and hurried to help him up. It's Little Uncle Master Lu Tao. Someone shouted, and the people who had gathered there all rushed over. Lu Tao held the fainted person in his arms, and his already fat face puffed up even more. Who hurt little junior brother? It's me. Before the crowd could answer, a male voice came from the opposite side. The crowd immediately made way and a thin and weak child walked over. He wore a green robe and his eyes were full of disdain. He snorted and said, Who asked him to look down on people? Who are you? Lu Tao's chubby little face scrunched up. I am. Before the other party could answer, Yi Qing was stunned and blurted out, Dog. He was actually the same child who had no parents back in the small village. Only then did the young man in green see Yi Qing beside him. Wild boy, you are actually still alive. The child was shocked and seemed to think of something. He glanced at Lu Tao beside him and his eyes were full of disdain. I didn't expect you to actually join Honesty sect and... I am Jing Qi, a disciple of Green Robe's sect. Remember it. Yi Qing seemed to not care at all and added, I am Yi Qing. Jing Qi frowned and some anger rose inexplicably. But Lu Tao fed the disciple in his arms an elixir and looked up at Jing Qi. Why did you hurt my little junior brother? He stopped us from entering the disciple hall first, Jing Qi said angrily. He is not as skilled as others, so he can't blame us. You are talking nonsense. As soon as he finished speaking, a disciple beside him retorted, It was clearly your people who stole the sect's spirit herbs, so senior brother stopped you here, you bunch of thieves. Who stole your spirit herbs? Don't you slander us. Jing Qi said indignantly. How dare you deny it? The disciple pointed at a little girl behind him and said, The ones on her head are the ones. Only then did everyone turn to look at the little girl behind Jing Qi. Sure enough, she was wearing a garland on her head. There were colorful flowers on it, faintly exuding spiritual energy. That's the spirit grass that the sect leader told us to plant. Little senior brother has been taking care of it for more than a month. But as soon as they came, all of them were plucked clean. That was why they came to stop them. As soon as these words came out, everyone looked at the little girl. They were all young and anger came quickly and directly. Even among the disciples of the Qingyi sect, there were many whose expressions changed. The little girl was so scared that she took a step back and hid behind Jing Qi. Her eyes turned red at once and she grabbed the corner of Jing Qi's clothes tightly. With a crying voice she said anxiously, I don't know, I just think those flowers are pretty, big brother Jing Qi. Jing Qi immediately put on a distressed expression. He was clearly still a child, but he directly turned around and hugged the little girl who was 1 year older into his arms and comforted her. The scene was a little awkward no matter how one looked at it. Little junior sister, don't cry. My heart will ache. With that said, he turned around and glared at the other children in front of him. Isn't it just some broken grass? It's worth it for you to bully people like this. After understanding the cause and effect, Lu Tao was furious. It was clearly the other party who stole the spirit herbs first and injured them later, but she could still be so righteous. Stealing the sect's spirit herbs is a big crime. She must be punished for stealing. The little girl cried even more sadly. Are you all deaf? Jing Qi glared at him and said, my little junior sister already said that she didn't do it on purpose. She didn't even know that it was a spirit herb. As the saying goes, those who don't know are not guilty. This matter can't be blamed on her. At most, we will return it to you in the future. Whether she knows or not, the spirit herbs are with her now, Lu Tao said seriously. Lu Tao said seriously, she should be punished. Moreover, you injured my junior brother just now, so you're the same. You. Jing Qi became even angrier, his face full of anger as if he had been greatly wronged. Suddenly, he thought of something and turned to look at I Ching beside him. Wild boy, do you think so too? I Ching was stunned and a trace of confusion flashed across his face. He had just thought of the 10th dish he was going to make for Master tonight. My junior sister is still a child. Do you really have to be so aggressive? He said this as if the others were not children. I Ching glanced at the little girl behind him with a frightened face, and then understood what he was asking. His little face darkened and after a while he said, wrong is wrong. You. Jing Qi's face was full of disbelief as if he had been betrayed. You are actually such an ungrateful person. Do you know that little junior sister is the daughter of the Green Robes sect master? I Ching was stunned, but his expression did not change. Then? Does it have anything to do with this? If not for the protection of the Green Robes sect, the people in our village would have been eaten by demons long ago. I didn't expect that once you joined Honesty sect, you would help others to deal with the daughter of your benefactor. He said righteously. You are really too cold-blooded. I Ching frowned. The villagers were obviously saved by Master and Supremacy Lone Moon. What did this have to do with the Green Robes sect? Cut the crap. Lu Tao could not bear to listen anymore. He looked at the surrounding disciples and said, catch these 2 thieves who stole the spirit herbs and hurt people. The surrounding disciples immediately surrounded them. Jing Qi still protected the little girl behind him, and pulled out his sword and looked at the crowd fiercely. But the other Green Robes disciples who were originally following behind him looked at each other and hesitated. Humph, you are just relying on your numbers. Jing Qi laughed coldly and something flashed in his eyes. He still looked at the children arrogantly. I didn't expect that the dignified Honesty sect is also a group of shameless scoundrels. You can't win, so you want to bully others with your numbers. Who can't win? Lu Tao glared at him angrily. Didn't I defeat that junior brother of yours just now? He is a sword cultivator, so weak. Don't speak ill of my Honesty sect. Lu Tao was furious. He pointed at him angrily and said, my junior brother just entered the sect not long ago, and is only at the 2nd level of Qi refinement. You are at the 3rd level, of course he can't win you. Fight with me if you dare. Alright, let's fight. A hint of joy flashed in Jing Qi's eyes. If you lose, you have to let us into the Hall of Disciples and apologize to my junior sister. Alright. Lu Tao nodded and said, if you lose, you have to apologize to my junior brother too. Alright. I Ching frowned. He had a feeling that the other party said this on purpose and was about to speak. But Lu Tao had already pulled out his spirit sword. He did not feel that he would lose at all. After all, he was already at the 5th level of Qi refinement. Against someone at the 3rd level of Qi refinement, there was naturally no possibility of him losing. Seeing that the 2 of them were ready, the disciples all made way, and I Ching also retreated to the side. Chapter 310. The Qi refinement disciples had yet to learn any spells. Although it was a competition, it was just a competition of sword techniques. Although Lu Tao's body was round, it did not hinder his movements at all. His moves were not slow at all. Could be seen that he had practiced a lot. What surprised everyone was Jing Qi. He was not slower than Lu Tao at all. Not only could he block every move, but he could also counterattack at the right time. I Ching could not help but be surprised. Jing Qi had only joined Green Robe's sect for a few months. He did not expect his sword techniques to be so powerful. He did not look like he was only at the 3rd level of Qi refinement. But his cultivation was lower than Lu Tao's after all. He had some advantages at the beginning, but Lu Tao's cultivation did not increase for nothing. After a long time, Jing Qi's spirit power was obviously not enough and he began to lose. So Lu Tao sped up his sword moves and attacked directly, intending to end this competition. He even deliberately moved half an inch to prevent hurting people. The sword was about to land on his opponent's neck. Jing Qi's complexion suddenly sank. With a turn of his hand, a red flame instantly rushed towards Lu Tao, striking him away. The next moment there was a bang. Lu Tao fell several feet. Fortunately, he was wearing a Dharma robe, which directly absorbed the flame. Other than a little pain, he was not burned by the fire. However, Jing Qi's sword was already pressed against his neck. Jing Qi looked at him mockingly and said coldly, "Damn fatty, you've lost." Lu Tao was stunned. He looked at the sword that fell not far away and did not react for a moment. The people present all exclaimed in a low voice. That was the fire manipulation art, right? He can manipulate fire at the 3rd level of Qi refinement. So powerful. That is a spell that can only be used by Foundation Establishment cultivators. He actually defeated Little Uncle Master Lu Tao. Little Uncle Master is at the 5th level. Yes, I did not expect Green Robe's sect to have such a powerful person. I heard that he has a heaven spirit root. For a moment, everyone looked at Jing Qi with excitement. Even the hostility just now had lessened a lot. Jing Qi snorted coldly as if he did not see their shocked expressions. He looked at the people below with even more disdain. Damn fatty, admit defeat. Quickly apologize to my little junior sister. Lu Tao was not angry, nor did he feel humiliated. He quickly got up and bowed to the little girl not far away. I'm sorry. You can go to the disciples' hall now. After thinking for a moment, he added, but I will still tell the sect leader about you guys plucking the spiritual herbs and injuring little junior brother. This was a different matter, he was still very clear about it. You. Jing Qi was exasperated, and the way he looked at Lu Tao became even fiercer. After a while he took a deep breath. Because they were in Honesty Sect's territory, he had to bear with it. Glancing at the fatty in front of him, he couldn't help but mock. Looks like your Honesty Sect isn't that great? A 5th level Qi disciple can't even beat a 3rd level Qi disciple like me. You know how to control fire. I really can't beat you. Unexpectedly, Lu Tao admitted it with a serious face. How could a child who was less than 10 years old have so many twists and turns? Even the other disciples nodded their heads, as if they did not understand the mockery in his words. Jing Qi felt as if his heart was being stifled for a moment. His anger was unable to rise or fall, and he just wanted to find an exit. Turning his head, he saw I Ching who had just come with the fatty. His eyes darkened instantly and he pointed directly at him. Hey wild boy, we're also from the same village. Why don't we have a competition too? For some reason he just couldn't stand this person. They were both orphans, but he seemed to be one head above him in every way, whether in the village or now. He often called people uncle and auntie, but the villagers preferred him who didn't talk much. He was lucky to join an immortal sect, but he turned around and joined the bigger Honesty Sect, as if he was born to be his nemesis. Don't worry, I won't use the fire manipulation art, he said with some eagerness as if he wanted to prove something. We are both Qi disciple level 3. No. I Ching rejected instantly. What? He was stunned for a moment, and then he laughed coldly and provoked him. Are you afraid that you can't beat me and lose to me? Yes, I can't beat you. He hadn't learned sword techniques yet. Jing Qi was speechless. He didn't expect I Ching to really admit it. Suddenly it was like punching cotton and he felt depressed and suffocated. I Ching thought for a while and added, I'm not free either. He had to go back and cook for master later. It took him a lot of effort to think of 20 dishes. With that said, he directly turned and walked into the disciples' hall without waiting for the other party's reaction, and also called the little fatty away. Only Jing Qi was left, his face dark, and his hands by his side instantly clenched. In the main hall, Sect Master Lu Hong sighed and looked at Lone Moon beside him. I didn't expect the demon race to be so rampant now. They actually dared to gather people to attack an immortal sect. Green Robe's sect was careless and thus fell into their hands. They didn't activate the protective mountain array? Lone Moon frowned. Normally, every sect would have a protective mountain array to block the enemy's attack, and to buy time for rescue. Green Robe's sect was not far from Honesty sect. Even if the rescue was not in time, it wouldn't be to the extent of being wiped out, right? I also don't know why their protective mountain array was not activated. Lu Hong shook his head. By the time I received the news, it was already too late. But I found the demonic aura of a 10th level demon king there. I'm afraid that even if the array was activated, it would not be able to stop those demons. 10th level? The demon king personally attacked? He suddenly thought of a certain rabbit. When did the demon race become so courageous? So many demons, why did they attack a small sect? I also don't understand this matter. Lu Hong also looked puzzled. They usually didn't have much contact with Green Robe's sect, but they also knew that it was a sect poorer than them. Apart from the sect master who was a nascent soul, there were very few Golden Core disciples in the sect. When Junior Brother and I received the message and rushed over, the entire Green Robe sect was almost slaughtered. Shining, what do you think happened? Lone Moon looked at Shining beside him. Shining looked up. The demon race attacked Green Robe's sect. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. They were in a meeting after all. Even if she was pretending, she should at least be more serious. Green Robe's sect is less than 100 miles away from here. To the south. Thinking of her poor sense of direction, he immediately changed his words. It's the immortal sect near the village that I Ching was previously at. Oh. Shining seemed to have just reacted. The demon race has never acted in groups. Lone Moon frowned. First it was that small village, then Green Robe's sect. So many demons appeared together and they were all nearby. There must be another reason. Xinying's eyes narrowed. After a while she said, that alarm, as expected. Lone Moon's heart could not help but tighten. Chapter 311. You also think it has something to do with that person? Lone Moon's eyes lit up. The demons obviously had a motive. And when they were in that small village, the only abnormal person was the one Shining met, the person that the God Fiend said had a providence skewed towards. The providence in this world was not fixed. It was rarely concentrated on one person, but the total amount did not change. In other words, if one person had more providence, it would be less relative to others. There were gains and there were losses. Shining said that she met the person who had providence skewed towards, and he had already left. And that night the demons attacked the village. Then the immortal sect next to it, Green Robe's sect, was also annihilated. They were so close that it was impossible not to think of them. Supremacy, what do you mean? Did you figure out the reason? Lu Hong was dumbfounded. Nothing. Lone Moon glanced at him and said, the demons should be looking for someone or something, so they attacked Green Robe's sect. Lu Hong nodded. Indeed, a small sect like Green Robe's sect was not worth the attention of a 10th level demon king, unless they were looking for something. Oh yes, Junior Brother and I were in a secret room, and we found a few disciples who had just entered Green Robe's sect. Disciples? Lone Moon's eyes turned cold. So, Lu Hong shuddered involuntarily. So, we brought her back. You want to take them into the sect? Lone Moon laughed coldly. It was written all over his face that you were so poor that you couldn't even feed your own people. How dare you take in new disciples? Lu Hong broke out in a cold sweat. There are many talented ones among them. Lu Hong didn't dare to speak mainly because he was poor. Ever since Supremacy Lone Moon came to Honesty sect in just a few months, the whole sect had changed. The spirit chi was rich, not to mention. The main thing was that the methods he taught to reorganize the sect were really useful. The pockets of the whole sect were instantly filled. Originally he didn't feel it because he was used to being poor. But since he had spirit stones, every time he saw those people from top immortal sects, he didn't feel weak anymore and his back straightened. In the past, it was already a great reward for every disciple in the sect to receive a Taoist robe. Now they could even carve an array on their Taoist robes. In the past, they had kept the magic tools and magic treasures that they did not dare to use easily. Now that they had spirit stones, they could throw them away after using them. This was something that he didn't even dare to think about in his hundreds of years of cultivation. But now it had all come true. And all of this was due to Supremacy Lone Moon's efforts. If not for the fact that Lone Moon was adamant in his opposition, coupled with the disdain that seeped out of his bones, he would have thrown away the position of the sect master. No, transferred it to him. As long as he was around, becoming a top-notch sect was just around the corner. The only bad thing was that Supremacy Lone Moon's temper was a little bad. His expression did not change and he still looked like a top-notch supremacy. But every time his face darkened, he would feel a cold wind piercing into his bones, and he couldn't help but go weak in the knees. He felt that this was the majesty of an upper-level cultivator. In this world, perhaps only the venerable friend he brought could remain calm in front of him. Speaking of which, what was that supremacy's name again? He subconsciously looked to the side, at the woman who was already leisurely nibbling on a plate of fruits. Shani? Shinyang? Alright, that's not important. Supremacy, those are all half-grown children, they have nowhere to go. Lu Hong continued laughing. What's more, it's almost time for our sect to accept disciples. The elders of the sect are all waiting outside. Supremacy, why don't you come and take a look first? Lone Moon frowned, then nodded. Lu Hong gave a few instructions. In a short while, some core formation Dao lords and the only two nascent soul cultivators in the sect, Lu Rue, entered one after another. Perhaps it was because Lone Moon had been forcing them to earn money these days, but after they greeted the few of them, they looked towards the door obediently, waiting for the disciples to enter. It was as if they were afraid that Lone Moon would talk to them about something. Lu Hong asked the disciples to bring the disciples over. In less than a quarter of an hour, they saw a group of children about 10 years old coming over from afar. There were dozens of them, some in green, some in blue and white disciple robes. Once they entered, they lined up in the main hall and bowed together. Then they sized up the people in the hall with some curiosity, anxiety and excitement. These were the group of children who had just gotten into a conflict in the disciples' hall. Jing Qi was taller than his peers, so he stood at the back, feeling a little nervous. After coming to Honesty Sect, he realized that Green Robe's sect, which was like a paradise in his eyes, was only a low-class immortal sect. After Green Robe's sect was destroyed and they were brought here by the sect master of Honesty Sect, he guessed that they were prepared to keep them. And with his qualifications, it wouldn't be a problem for him to join any sect. He had no objections to joining Honesty Sect, since they were all immortal cultivators. But after what happened with I Ching and the little fatty, he was a little hesitant. A gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall. He only found out afterwards that the little fatty was the son of the sect master, and he had already offended him. Though he didn't feel regret, if he stayed here in the future, he would definitely seek revenge. Unless he couldn't help but look up to the front. He heard that 2 soul formation supremacies came to Honesty Sect a few months ago. If he could join them, he wouldn't have to worry. He couldn't help but glance at the 2 people sitting at the top, but suddenly met a pair of slightly narrowed eyes. He got a shock and froze instantly. But the person sitting at the top tilted her head. Yo, it really was her. What's the matter? Lone Moon turned to look at Shining, who had suddenly spoken. He subconsciously followed her line of sight. Jing Qi immediately lowered his head. His mind was in turmoil. That woman was clearly the one who ate at Wild Kid's house that day. She was actually a soul formation supremacy. His heart was in a mess. Before he could react, I Ching, who had just come in with him, suddenly walked out of the crowd. Under his and everyone's shocked gaze, he walked up to that woman and called out very naturally, "Master." Jing Qi's eyes narrowed, and the resentment in his eyes almost overflowed. That was his master. What a wild little. No, I Ching. No wonder he purposely drove him away that day. So he already knew that the person in the house was a soul formation supremacy, but just didn't want him to be chosen by a supremacy too. How scheming. Shining nodded. Thinking that he was still a child now, she handed him another fruit. Here. I Ching was stunned. He looked at the fruit in her hand and took it. His little brows frowned subconsciously, but he still replied, "Thank you, master." He already said that the fruit wasn't ripe. Chapter 312. Is your disciple's name tag ready? Lone Moon, who had already turned his gaze to Chef, asked casually. Yes. I Ching nodded and turned to stand beside Shen Ying obediently. He had to hurry back to cook later. He could not let Master eat this kind of unripe fruit again. Lu Hong looked at Lone Moon and suggested with a smile, "Supremacy, among the disciples that we brought back this time, there are indeed quite a number of disciples with good aptitudes. There's even a fire elemental heaven spirit root. One look and you can tell that he's a good seedling that's very suitable for sword cultivation." He immediately began to recommend, implying that Lone Moon should also accept a disciple. "Aren't we a sword cultivation sect?" Lone Moon was not moved at all. He picked up the teacup beside him and said, "Sword cultivation is the heart of the sword. The understanding of sword techniques has little to do with spirit roots. Besides, the difference between spirit roots is only the amount of spirit chi absorbed. We don't lack spirit chi here." Yes. Lu Hong's mouth twitched. "You have money, whatever you say is right." After thinking for a while, he did not give up and said, "This disciple's ability to understand is not bad, and he is also smart. I heard from the surviving disciples of Green Robe's sect that he was the one who let everyone hide in that secret room, so that these disciples could escape." Lone Moon raised his eyebrows. Seeing that he was interested, Lu Hong continued, "Supremacy sect is empty, you don't see any disciples. Even Shin. Supremacy Shin already has a disciple, why don't Supremacy also accept one so that you can pass on your mantle?" Lone Moon's mouth twitched. "Who said he was empty? There were still more than 200 disciples in the invincible heavenly palace in the immortal world, which one of them was not taught by him? If not for Shen Ying this cheat, would they be able to cultivate crooked? Could they? Even now, I Ching said that he was Shen Ying's disciple, but in the end he was still the one who taught them. Seeing that he did not reply for a long time, Lu Hong thought that he had admitted it. He quickly looked up at the group of little radishes in front of him, and waved at Jing Qi, who he had met once at the back. "Come, child, come to the front, let Supremacy see." The children were stunned and turned around curiously. Jing Qi was overjoyed and clenched his fists. Thank goodness. There were 2 Supremacies in Honesty sect. If he joined the other sect, he would not be any worse than I Ching. He suppressed his excitement and took a step to the side. Only then did he pass the crowd and walk forward. Only then did Lone Moon look up. Then, puff. He was so shocked by the scene in front of him that he spat out a mouthful of tea and instantly stood up from his chair. *CK. What the hell was this? Shen Ying's exclamation of surprise echoed in his mind. He turned and glared at the person beside him. "You freaking knew. It's not that early." Shen Ying tilted her head. 2 minutes ago. *CK. Would it kill you to remind me? I don't think so. Say that again. He said word by word, his face filled with the words food expenses. I just reminded you. You were obviously looking at Chef and didn't realize it. Mother***. Lone Moon had an urge to tear her apart. Supremacy? Lu Hong, who was at the side, was dumbfounded. Why did they suddenly quarrel? Should he stop them? What's wrong? Is there a problem with this child? The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He glanced at Jing Qi below and then sat back down. No problem. In the eyes of others, there was indeed no problem. After all, it was just a 10-year-old child. However, in his eyes, this 10-year-old child, who was not even as tall as his waist, was shrouded in a shadow. It was as if he was wearing a transparent humanoid costume, and the 2 figures were stacked together. The key thing was that the shadow was a fatty, the kind that was as fat as a ball. He could even see the 4 or 5 layers of his belly glistening with oil. It hung straight down and just happened to cover a certain indescribable part. That was right. It was a naked fatty. His fat face made the same expression as the child in his body. Perhaps because of the contrast, it looked even greasier. The key thing was that in the shadow's fat, there were balls of familiar aura. It was the providence of the god fiend that suddenly tilted and disappeared. However, none of this counted for much. What was more important was that the moment he saw him, the 3 bright red words that suddenly appeared in his mind were enough to blind him. Intruder. Holy shit. He had an urge to curse. It was obvious that the person in front of him was the result of the previous plane warning. This was an invader who transmigrated from another plane. As a newbie, Lone Moon really did not know how to deal with the so-called plane crisis. And the other party did not seem to know what they looked like. This was different from any plane invasion that Xinjing casually mentioned. He turned to look at Shening. Seeing that she did not look like she was going to deal with it immediately, he could only bear with it for now. Supremacy, what do you think of this child? Lu Hong wanted to say a few more words of praise. Lu Tao suddenly rushed in, his face anxious. Dad. Not good. Tao. Lu Hong reprimanded. Why are you so flustered? Dad. Lu Tao remembered his purpose and said anxiously, not good. Little junior brother suddenly started to vomit blood. The uncle master in the medicine hall said that he needs qi-nourishing pills to recover. Jishu? Lu Hong frowned. Speak slowly. How did he get injured, and how did his meridians get injured? And he needed qi-nourishing pills? Lu Tao was stunned. He turned to point at Jing Qi behind him. He got injured in a fight with him. I thought he just fainted. I didn't expect it to be so serious. With that said, he recounted what happened in front of the disciples' hall. Jing Qi's expression turned cold. A murderous look rose in his eyes. This fatty was despicable indeed. He must have deliberately chosen this time to complain. Nonsense. Lu Hong's expression darkened. He glared at him. No matter what the reason is, disciples of the sect are not allowed to fight in private. No matter how big the matter is, the uncle masters will deal with it. He turned to look at Jing Qi in front of him. You are the same. Although you are not a disciple of the sect, you are not allowed to hurt others. He reprimanded both sides, treating it as a child's play. However, he admired Jing Qi from the bottom of his heart. After all, a third-level qi refinement could defeat a fifth-level qi refinement. It was enough to show that Jing Qi's talent was extraordinary. However, the other party clearly did not think so. Jing Qi's expression darkened. His entire body exuded a gloomy aura. They were indeed father and son. One went back on his words. He said that he would not pursue the matter, but he ran in to complain. The other was even more biased. He subconsciously looked at the supremacy who was full of immortal qi. He could not help but feel a little expectant. He hoped that he was different from the others. He could see through the appearance and say something fair. However, after waiting for a while, the person did not say anything. He seemed to be thinking about something. Lu Hong took out a bottle of qi-nourishing pills and gave it to Lu Tao. Chapter 313. Give it to your junior brother. Let him receive his punishment after he recovers. With that said, he looked at Jing Qi and added, You too, go receive your punishment later. Thank you, father. Lu Tao was delighted. Perhaps he was thinking about his junior brother. He ran out quickly, not even looking at Jing Qi who was beside him. Instead, Jing Qi's hands tightened, the resentment in his heart grew. They were all punished, only Lu Tao was fine. He was indeed biased. Supremacy. After dealing with this little episode, Lu Hong looked at Lone Moon, still unable to resist persuading him to accept a disciple. Look at this child. After the complaint just now, Jing Qi was both nervous and expectant. A soul formation supremacy should be different. In the next moment he heard the other say a few words. I don't accept disciples. With that, Jing Qi's heart turned cold, the expectant expression on his face instantly darkened. A wave of anger immediately surged up. What soul formation supremacy? This group of people were indeed the same. To think that he still had a bit of expectation. This. Lu Hong was stunned. Supremacy, why don't you reconsider? After all, a heaven spirit root is rare. Moreover, it was a fire spirit root. No need, I have no intention of accepting disciples today anyway, and sword cultivators do not value spirit roots. No matter how talented a spirit root is, in my eyes, it is the same as the 5 spirit roots. Lone Moon continued. Sword cultivators value temperament more. Any kind of spirit root is fine for a good temperament. Moreover, having I Ching as a disciple on my mountain is enough, the others are just trouble. He still had to take care of food, and besides, who could compare to I Ching's special physique? Seeing this, Lu Hong did not continue persuading. Sigh, alright, if that's the case then, don't look down on me. Before he finished speaking, Jing Qi, who was below, looked like he could not help but look angry and humiliated. He raised his head and glared at Lone Moon. If you don't like me, just say it. What temperament? You don't have to mock me openly and implicitly. Aren't you just biased towards that little fatty? That's why you don't accept me? As soon as he said this, not only Lone Moon, but everyone present was shocked by this young man who suddenly looked angry. What was this? Don't think that I can't tell. But he still looked as if he had seen through the truth. He pointed at the crowd and said, You people from Honesty Sect are all birds of a feather. You can't tell right from wrong and only know how to protect your own people. Our Green Robes sect has been exterminated, but at least we still have a backbone, and we can't be humiliated by others. Don't look down on us. Impudent. Lu Hong finally reacted. Was he feeling resentful because of a single rejection? If it was already like this now, then what would happen after he cultivated it? Instantly, his good impression of Jing Qi fell to the bottom. Initially, he was thinking that if the supremacy did not want it, it would not be a bad idea for him and his junior brother to take in such a good spiritual route. However, from the looks of it now, the Venerable One was right. The spiritual route was secondary, the most important thing was one's temperament. What? Are you angry because I've hit the mark? Old fool. Jing Qi still looked like he was not afraid of power. He even looked at Shening and Lone Moon provocatively and snorted, "Humph? So what if he was a venerable? This young master doesn't care. Even without you, I will stand at a higher position than you one day." It was getting more and more ridiculous. Lu Hong was so angry that his beard blew up. That was really embarrassing. He was the one who thought the most of this kid. Now that he made such a scene, it was like slapping him in the face in front of everyone. So young and yet you have such a big mouth. But he was still a kid after all, and he could not punish him too harshly. He directly called 2 disciples in. Lock him in the forbidden room at the back of the mountain, and let him reflect on his mistakes. Yes. The 2 disciples immediately went forward to pull him. But Jing Qi directly pushed them away and even took out his spirit sword. Do you still want to kill him to silence him? The corner of Lu Hong's mouth twitched. Such a young kid, where did these dark thoughts come from? He sighed and did not want to talk more with him. He directly conjured a seal to fix him on the spot, and then waved his hand to let the disciples take him away. Not to mention taking him in as a disciple, he had to consider whether to take him into the sect now. After all, it looked like his brain was not working well. Jing Qi was only a Qi refinement, and naturally could not resist a nascent soul cultivator. Seeing that he was about to be dragged away, he had no choice but to glare fiercely at the people present, and shouted out a classic line word by word. The river flows east for 30 years and then west for 30 years. Do not bully the young because he is poor. Lone Moon, instantly, everyone in the hall looked at the person who walked out with a look of concern and concern for the mentally retarded. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Was he crazy? And what the hell was this familiar line? An invader with so many lines, did he really think he was the protagonist of a transmigration? And he did not say anything just now, right? He just did not want to take in a disciple. What the hell was with his expression as if the whole world had let him down? Did this person transmigrate from the plane of the mentally retarded? Lu Hong also looked so ashamed that he wanted to die. He glanced at Lone Moon weakly and hurriedly changed the topic. The matter of choosing a disciple, let's talk about it later. Let's investigate the matter of Green Robe's sect first. He coughed and then looked at the remaining disciples in green robes in the hall. Do any of you know why those demons attacked the Green Robe sect? The children looked at each other for a while, and a hint of fear and hesitation flashed across their eyes. Lu Hong hurriedly smiled and comforted them. Don't be afraid. Since you have come to Honesty Sect, you are disciples of our sect from now on. No matter what happens, the sect will protect you. Just tell me what you heard and saw before you came here. Only then did the children's expressions soften a little. They looked at the person in front of them and began to speak one after another. We saw a lot of man-eating demons. They ate a lot of senior brothers. Good, there are senior sisters. You said that senior sisters' meat is more delicious. They lost a lot of blood, so the sect master asked us to hide, or we would be eaten too. The sect master also said not to let us make a sound, if we can't find Green Feather. Green Feather. Orchid? Green Feather spiritual orchid. Those demons are looking for you, Tianlon? Lu Hong exclaimed, and his eyes widened suddenly, seeing the children nodding one after another. He hurriedly turned to Lone Moon and said, Supremacy, it seems that these demons are going for the Green Feather spiritual orchid. He said seriously, the Green Feather spiritual orchid is not only a holy medicine for healing, but also has the effect of cleansing the spirit and meridians. I heard that it can also be used to refine nascent formation pills, and eating it can increase the chances of forming a nascent soul by 30%. It's just that this Green Feather spiritual orchid only appears once every 10,000 years, and has always been rare. Lu Hong sighed. Green Robe sect actually has such a treasure. Lone Moon frowned. The demon monarch was already at the 10th level, and nascent formation pills had no effect on him at all. Why did he snatch this thing? And he didn't hesitate to exterminate the whole sect unless this thing originally belonged to him. Chapter 3:14. For some reason he felt that this matter might have something to do with that retarded, oh no, the invader. But he didn't expect the 3 Azure Realms to be so poor now. Even the Green Feather's spiritual orchid was a treasure that everyone fought for. He remembered that most of the radishes that Rabbit gave Shining every day were of this type. Occasionally, 1 or 2 such weeds would grow in the back mountain of Invincible Sect. He was thinking about the invader. After figuring out the demon's motive, he wasn't very interested in what happened next. After bidding farewell to Lu Hong, he pulled Xin Ying and Yi Qing back to Invincible Peak. How do you plan to deal with that Chinibyu? Once they reached the peak, Lone Moon asked directly. Open the plane door and chase him back? I can't. Xin Ying shrugged. What do you mean? How could there be someone in this world that you can't chase away? He looked suspicious. Xin Ying picked up a fruit out of habit. Just as she was about to eat it, Yi Qing suddenly snatched it from her and handed her a pastry. She paused and stuffed it directly into her mouth. He's mixed. Lone Moon paused. He suddenly thought of the fat shadow that wrapped around him. You mean the providence on him? That was the providence that belonged to this world. If they threw him back to his original plane now, it would indeed affect it. No. Xin Ying tilted her head. Providence is just some data. If it's missing, we can just add it. There was no difference. Lone Moon's mouth twitched. You're insulting all the children of Providence in novels. The point is the person who mixed. Person. Lone Moon paused. His eyes widened. You mean his current body? Indeed, in their eyes, Jing Qi was a fatty who had invaded their world. To outsiders, he was just a 10-year-old child. It was obvious that the fatty was the true body of the invader, which meant that the other party was a soul transmigrator. You're not going to say that the unlucky ghost that he possessed is still in his body, are you? Yes. Xin Ying nodded. Holy shit. Lone Moon cursed. Indeed, he couldn't just kick him back like that. Because he would kick 2 people at once. By then, it would be their people invading another plane. That's not right. He suddenly thought of something. Logically speaking, a body can only contain 1 soul. If his soul was possessed, the original soul should have been squeezed out. The system is incompatible. I'm trapped, Xin Ying said. You mean to say that the original soul was trapped in the invader's body like the karma? Lone Moon suddenly thought of the karma that was trapped in the body of the Chinibyu. How could this be? Could it be that the invader's soul was stronger than the others? Xin Ying lowered her head and thought for a moment before replying, maybe he's wider. What? The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He thought about the layers of fat on the illusory figure. You're saying that because he was too fat, the soul and the karma in his original body were trapped and could not come out? Yeah. Right, your sister. Since when was being fat a superpower? Hey, don't casually add a sense of existence to being fat. Then what do we do now? Are we going to let him stay here forever? With his belly full of karma, he might really become the male lead in the future. What about the original soul? We can't just let him stay here, can we? This was the first plane mission. Did they have to start with a high difficulty? Let's wait for him to exhaust. Exhaust? You mean we should exhaust his karma first? Lone Moon hesitated. He thought about it carefully. Indeed, the reason why the invader could trap the soul was more or less because of the karma. He had too much karma on him. Naturally, he would suppress others. Of course, the native soul could not resist him. The 2 of them were originally fused together. They could not casually separate them. After all, he was from another plane. The soul system was different. There might be some problems when they separated. But if the karma disappeared, the native soul would naturally instinctively resist. There would be problems when the 2 of them fused together. Then it would be much easier to attack. But he thought of another problem. Karma is not something that can be easily exhausted. He had amazing karma in the first place. Others could not exhaust his karma at all. Unless he met someone with the same karma or an opponent that he acknowledged himself and made him want to fight, then it would be effective. We can't possibly create another cheat just for him. There is. Xin Ying suddenly turned to look at the kitchen. Lone Moon hesitated. He glanced at a certain little figure who was cooking on a chair, very serious. This was really a wise choice. Chef, come. Let's discuss how to slap his face. In order to exhaust a person's karma, one had to strike him when he was at his most complacent, so that he could not be satisfied. That way he would want more and keep exhausting his own karma. The person who struck him down had to be the one who could make him want to compete with himself. And Chef was undoubtedly the best candidate. First of all, he came from the same village as the invader. They seemed to have the same starting point. Second, Chef was originally a dragon. He was destined to become a god. Even if the other party's karma was heaven-defying, he still needed to cultivate by himself. But Chef only lacked spirit chi. He could grow even with his eyes closed. In terms of speed, no one could be faster than him. Third, regarding the influence of karma, in theory, if that Jing Chi was lucky, a portion of people would be unlucky. This was the influence of karma. But Chef was a plain assistant. Although he could not completely bear the assistant seal because of his body, that seal was in his body. With this seal, all the rules in this world could not restrict him, including karma. That meant there was no need to worry at all that he would be affected by the invader's domineering aura. Finally, for some reason, that Jing Chi indeed seemed to have an inexplicable enmity towards Chef. He had already sensed it in the main hall earlier. Chef did not need to do anything at all to attract 100% of the other party's enmity. Lone Moon was just thinking about whether to let Chef go into seclusion and build his foundation before anything else, when something suddenly happened in Honesty Sect. The protective mountain array was activated instantly. The entire sect shook as if someone was attacking the array. In the next moment, a series of demonic roars came from not far away. Demonic chi suddenly surged outside the mountain gate. Large amounts of black chi headed straight for the sect. Supremacy. A disciple hurried over with a horrified look on his face. A lot of demons suddenly appeared outside the mountain gate and surrounded the mountain gate. Sect Master asked me to invite Supremacy over. They really came. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.